right, welcome on into another edition of DCU Daily on Oh So Curious. We got a lot to get into today, of course, as per always. It's a new week, so welcome on in. If you are watching live, then thank you for tuning in. We already got Monique in the chat. Marvelous Monday to y'all. It's dry rubbed air fried chuck steak with loaded mashed potatoes. That sounds delicious. Honka honka from Caleb. Is that the real you, Caleb? Have you changed your profile picture to somebody who actually looks like you for once? I hope for the best for Bruce Campbell. Stay groovy. Which one? Are you talking about the Bruce Campbell who works for Warner Brothers, or the Bruce Campbell, like, you know, from the Evil Dead movies? Anyway, speaking of which, let's talk about what's going to be on the show today. So, as is usually the case on Mondays, we talk about the box office. There was a movie scaring up almost $100 million at the weekend, and we'll be screaming our way through that news. And then, of course, we got to talk about the call. There was a media call today from Paramount, Skydance, talking about their plans for what they want to do with Warner Brothers and HBO. So we'll talk about that. We'll get into the reactions and what people are feeling like over at HBO and Warner Brothers at large. Of course, we'll also then get into some MCU talk. Well, more Marvel talk than MCU talk, because Spider-Noir is really doing some good stuff right now. There's character posters. The rating for the show has been announced. And then, of course, we do have to get into the awards season. There were a couple of big award shows over this past weekend, and they might have just turned the Oscars race upside down, and we'll get into that. I'll talk about it. You guys let me know if you saw any of them. There was the PGA award, the NAACP awards, Image Awards, or of course the big ones were the Actors Awards, and then there was the whole Jim Carrey clone situation at the Caesar Awards. So all that, and of course we're gonna get into the future of James Gunn. We did the whole future of Zack Snyder at the DC in the DCU, which was more speculative than anything else based on his interview on Friday. But today I wanted to talk about all the reactions after the Paramount deal and people speculating that James Gunn might just get up and walk out the door. We'll talk about it. We'll gauge your opinion on it. And I'm running solo today because John, of course, is sort of relapsed into the cold, so he'll be back tomorrow hopefully. But with that, let's hit that news intro and get the show started.
It doesn't seem to matter what I do. I'm always the number two.
All right, mister, I need to paint my abs on to get nominated. You don't see Robert Downey doing that.
You're kidding. You're kidding. I can't open the envelope without the...
Warner Brothers is heading back into the Matrix with a new movie in the works.
Wonder what other surprises are in store.
I want to be Bruce Wayne. I like that. You're gonna love me.
There's the shot right there. That.
Okay, we don't need to see chords.
Right there.
You look ridiculous.
Well, not no more, he don't.
What, dude? I can barely understand you. Your accent's insane.
What the needs now?
Give me a hand up. Nope, I'm actually okay. Thank you very much. Oh, wow. Wow.
All right, okay. I never stopped the music, but it's the show music, so it's all good. Hey, welcome on into the news. Lots to get into, as I mentioned earlier, right off the top of the show. I see more of you guys are popping in as the show goes on. Of course, we are live, and you just got me today. I am going to be running it solo. Of course, I'm your host, Daniel. We're going to talk about the weekend box office first, and well, I did not go to see this movie, but a lot of people clearly did, because Scream 7 scared up, according to the Hollywood Reporter, all the puns, a record $64 million opening at the US box office, the domestic box office. That's a record for the franchise, and then of course for the worldwide number, $97 million. That is, yeah, almost $100 million, just a little bit off that. And yeah, a victorious Paramount, getting more good news. They just got their hands on the Warner Brothers Discovery company. And of course now in what feels like a very underwhelming slate of movies in 2026, Scream 7 comes along. And, reviews be damned, it's doing really good numbers at the box office, at least for the opening weekend. So yeah, of course, this was a movie that is produced by Spyglass Entertainment, with Paramount. It's the franchise best opening weekend, and it's significant because it again gives Paramount another reason to celebrate on top of all the celebrations. I'm sure like they were popping bottles with of course Warner Brothers. They're the new owners of Warner Brothers. So you guys let me know what you think about that. I mean, I'd say that's pretty significant, all around. And I'm surprised, quite frankly, because I mean, I'm not the biggest horror fan, so like, I'm not the person who's gonna be like lining up to see this movie on opening weekend. Uh, we got Punisher in the chat talking about Sadie Sink in the Spider-Man movie, I assume. Well, it's a good theory, man. It's a good theory. I'm not so sure about that. We're not going to be getting into that today, but I'm thankful that you brought that up. Maybe somebody else in the chat will get in on it. Yeah, I mean, Scream 7, almost $100 million opening weekend. I mean, it kicked off the weekend with Thursday previews at $7.8 million. Then it, you add that up with the opening day Friday, it made almost $30 million by the time it got into Saturday. And yeah, it ended up bringing in over 30 million internationally and 64 million domestically. So much more domestic leaning that a lot of movies tend to be. But again, it's a horror movie, so horror movies tend to perform really well in North America. There's a dedicated audience, and it comes at a time when, of course, Paramount is in the process of now buying Warner Brothers. The deal is more or less signed, and we're about to go from 5 historic legacy movie studios in Hollywood to 4. Although I always like to say, like, look, Amazon MGM is a thing, Apple Original Films is a thing, and the amount of money they're investing in their movies, and with Amazon they've got their own distribution arm now under MGM, so they almost act like a traditional studio. And MGM obviously has that history going all the way back to the studio system. So there's I'm a little more pragmatic about it, but like still, you're going from 5 historic to 4. Like, there used to be Disney, I mean, which wasn't even really a traditional legacy studio to begin with. They were just doing animated movies for decades and decades. And, the live action ones that they didn't quite have that lasting power until you got to like the 90s and 2000s even. But the point being, you used to have Fox, you used to have Universal, Columbia, which is Sony, of course. You had MGM, which still exists in one form or another under Amazon, and you had Warner Brothers and Paramount, and now you will have Warner Brothers and Paramount. We'll get into it later, but they'll still exist, but it's yet to be seen how much you can look at them as like individual studios. So we'll talk about that later on. But yeah, I mean, Scream 7 opening up to almost $100 million worldwide. Let me know what you think about that in the comments down below. It's definitely, a good start, a franchise best start. And the question becomes, will it be able to, have those legs to carry this on forward? Because, well, we could use a little bit of money at the box office right now. I'm not saying like, give me money, but just the box office as a whole, Hollywood isn't doing the best right now with regard to movies, because it is still only the beginning of March and there's not a lot of big movies coming out. At least you got to wait a couple of weeks for Project Hail Mary to come out. So you got some runway for Scream to make a bit of money until then. All right, so we got Brogu in the chat. Hello, Brogu, always making the world a better place. D-Cole is here. Hello, D-Cole. And I know you're going to be wanting to talk about James Gunn, and we'll get into that later. Don't you worry. Scream 7 was absolute trash. All caps 3 out of 10, says Just Some Geeky Guy. You know what? There you go. And a lot of people have been saying that. Like, you look at the Rotten Tomato score, you look at the popcorn meter, it's not particularly high. So, the horror community, fandom like showed up and showed out for opening weekend. But I've seen some really mediocre reviews for it. I mean, I'm not saying mediocre as in the reviews mediocre, but just people's reactions are, ranging anywhere from like, what the hell was that, to this was super generic, to this was a total waste of time. So yeah, I mean, Justin Geek Guy, thank you for the super chat. My concern would be like, will Scream 7 actually be able to like, hold a good value at the box office next weekend, because it opened to 64 million domestically. Will it make even half that next weekend, right? I mean, there's not a ton counter programming, but we'll see how well it does in its second weekend. Apple has some great programming. Speaking of it, programming, Brogu, absolutely. Apple's films, I mean, they don't distribute their own movies. Like, F1 was distributed by Warner Brothers. They've worked with, Sony and Paramount before for their other movies, like Argyle and Napoleon and, Killers of the Flower Moon. They don't really seem interested in setting up that infrastructure. Netflix, doesn't do that either. Obviously, Netflix doesn't release movies in theaters anyway. I mean, their intention was to get Warner Brothers Discovery and sort of have that infrastructure in-house then via Warner Brothers. Of course, you have Amazon, which Brennan bought MGM, and so now through MGM they have that infrastructure for theatrical distribution. So Amazon does a lot of their stuff in-house, and they're growing their slate. So where if there were to be a situation where Paramount all of a sudden kill the slate for Warner Brothers, which, I mean, look, if that were to happen, that'd be similar to what Disney did with Fox. Like, Disney's output today is, when you look at what Fox was putting out when it was his own studio and what Disney was doing, what Disney's doing now, having Fox, studio, the 20th Century Studios rolled in, is probably at best maybe 2/3 of what the two studios used to do separately. So, and even that is an optimistic take depending on the year. So, yeah, I mean, there's questions about like, where the movies will be coming from. But Hunter Iggy saying, where is John? Hello, Hunter. John is sort of relapsed over the weekend and, with the flu and the cold that he had. So we'll see how he does tomorrow, but he's resting up right now. What's up, Watcher? How are you doing? Do you think that Scream 8 will be the last movie? D. Cole asks. Well, here's the thing. It will all depend on how well this movie does. At 97 million worldwide already, it's well on its way to making its money back. It's not quite made all its money back, because you got to account for the marketing cost as well. If Scream does enough to be profitable, Scream 7, I can see them like making a Scream 8. But I mean, look, it's a horror franchise. Like, it took how many years for us to get another trilogy of Halloween movies? They could say it's the last movie for the foreseeable future, but even the Mission Impossible movies will probably get more. And with Tom Cruise. So I don't think Scream 8 will be the last. It will probably be like maybe the next last one until a while. So, but it all depends on how well Scream 7 does in the second weekend onward. So, and it's got like Project Hail Mary on the way, which will be, the Scream killer, as it were, in a couple of weeks. The Watcher, we'll talk about all of that later, don't you worry. I agree with you. I think there's a bit of fear-mongering going on. It's also, I think some of it is just like, these visceral reactions, because if you are passionate about the movies, then, and, you see this happen, and it's hard because, there's a lot of politics involved, so, and we don't talk about politics on the show unless it's very directly related to the movies, but people are reacting without necessarily, it's reactions they're not, it's not facts, right? Like, it's speculation, reactions, so we'll get into that later. But yeah, Hunter Iggy saying, I hope John didn't get COVID-19. I don't think he did. I mean, he would have told me. I mean, at this point he's been sick for like a week or so, 2 weeks almost, so I hope that he got tested, but I imagine that the symptoms weren't there, and we just hope that he gets better. Brogu saying, tell John I said hello and I hope he feels better. Absolutely, I will tell him that. I think John will be very happy to hear that you said that for him. So, all right. Well, as we move on with the show, I mean, of course, we talked about Scream 7. That was the big movie this weekend. It's going to be the big movie for at least another week until you get, Project Hail Mary coming out. And then, from there, hopefully the year at the movies truly begins. But until then, I figured let's talk about some more Paramount Warner Brothers Discovery stuff. I know that we have talked about it at length. But yeah, thank you, Watcher. Yeah, we try to avoid politics whenever possible, because it's it's like, if you don't talk about it at Thanksgiving dinner, then we don't talk about it on the show. I think is a good way to do things. Honka honka to you, Caleb. Welcome on in. I am curious, what is that profile photo? Is that you? Is that the real you? Because I'm like, do I need to zoom into that somehow? I mean, do I need to enhance that photo and get a look at what the real Caleb Underwood looks like? Johnny Dome Studios saying Gunn leaving is going to be his choice because David Ellison seems to want him to stay. Exactly. That's a good point. And you know what? Speaking of which, our coverage of the whole Warner Brothers Discovery bidding war has been extensive, and I'd like to think, complete and relatively unbiased. I know obviously John usually has his opinions, and I will give you mine too. But as far as the news itself, today Paramount held a call with Wall Street analysts, and the goal of the call was to kind of lay out a high level overview of their plans for the combined company once Warner Brothers Discovery, merges with Paramount, and they're planning on, having that happen and the deal to close by September of this year. Internally at Warner Brothers, David Zaslav said this at the company town hall last week after the deal was announced, that it would take 6 to 12 months. So 6 months is the September timeline. 12 months means next March. So depending on how long it takes, even a year from now, it's going to be still pretty early to tell where all of this is going to ultimately end up, right? Because it will take a few years for things to truly shake out and for us to get a good assessment. But to kind of start us on that path, because if you're, for example, an employee at Paramount, if you're an employee at Warner Brothers Discovery or any of their subsidiary companies, whether it's CNN or if you work in Nickelodeon or Comedy Central, or if you work at one of the movie studios like Paramount Pictures or New Line Cinema or even DC Studios, you are wondering where all of this is headed, right? So I'm going to get into the details in a second, but I just want to kind of do a high level overview, because I know there's a lot to talk about. So we'll break into the different pieces, but I figured let's take a look at some of the TLDR elements. So I can't tell if this is a Photoshop image or if somebody did this with AI or whatever the case might be, but I mean Photoshop has AI built in, so anyway, I digress. Paramount today did a media call, and I actually listened to the call as it was happening. They went over their plan, then they had a Q&A session, and in that a call, the whole thing lasted about an hour, a little less than an hour. So it wasn't terribly long. It's like a PowerPoint presentation. They're talking over it, audio only, and then they take some questions. And most of the questions were from Wall Street analysts or basically financial media. So that said, let's talk about some of what they mentioned. Again, at a high level, they did say that HBO Max and Paramount Plus. Now, they didn't say HBO Max and Paramount Plus explicitly. They said we're going to combine our streaming portfolios into one platform. And I'll go into this again in more detail, but I'm just kind of doing this high level for now. David Ellison himself said that, the idea would be that we will be producing 30 movies a year, and then basically that would mean 15 per studio. So they're looking at 15 from Warner Brothers side, 15 from Paramount side, and then they want to give all the movies a 45-day theatrical window, and that could extend to 60 to 90 days for the really big movies, the ones that make a lot of money. And then they will also still give them a pay one window, which is kind of the first streaming service where it lands on. Currently for Warner Brothers, all their movies first land on HBO Max. For Paramount, they had a deal for a while with Amazon, and that deal recently expired. So it's going to be interesting to see where that will head and how that will change. But basically, they're committing to a theatrical window of 45 days, which is what Netflix, had also been looking to do. The merged company will be carrying a debt load of $79 billion, which is significant, and that's a big concern for a lot of the employees at the company, because usually when your company is heavily loaded with debt, the leadership tries to cut that debt down a few different ways. You could sell off stuff, you can fire and lay off a lot of people, or you could try to make money, right? There's only a handful of ways you could do that. So, making money by making good decisions that are financially successful. So, a lot of people are worried about their jobs because, if you sell off something, that could mean there's going to be layoffs with new ownership. If you spin off a part of your company, that could be part of the way that you get rid of the debt. That's what Warner Brothers was trying to do. Under the Netflix deal, they would have spun off the cable networks, and a lot of the debt would go with the cable networks. So the Warner Brothers that would have merged with Netflix would have a much smaller amount of debt relative to what this company will have. And that's part of the reason why Netflix, liked that proposal and that deal that they had. But that won't be the case here. They'll be carrying a lot more debt. Now, they confirmed this on the call, $6 billion in cost cutting. And a lot of this, because they were asked about this after in the Q&A session, and David Ellison said a lot of what we will cut will come from consolidating on the tech infrastructure, the tech stacks of their many different streaming platforms. Over on the Warner Brothers side, we have already seen over the past couple of years, they have on the tech stack side, basically the back end of the streaming service, when you go into the streaming service, whether it's the app or the website, all the work that goes into making that experience happen for you, for us, that for a lot of, if you're going to Disney Plus, the back end of that is run completely differently and separately from what they do at Paramount Plus, right? Now, Paramount Plus and Pluto TV are both owned by Paramount Skydance. And then, of course, on the Warner Brothers side, you have Warner Brothers, Discovery Plus, and you have HBO Max. So both companies have two streaming services. And on the Warner Brothers side, for the last few years, they've been integrating the tech stack for Discovery Plus and HBO Max. So while they still function as two different streaming services to the public, on the back end, the tech stuff is all kind of unified. And Paramount has been doing something similar for Pluto TV and Paramount Plus over the past couple of years. I mean, they also sort of killed Showtime as its own thing and merged it into Paramount Plus. So the idea here would be to take those two things and combine them on the back end. They were sort of vague about what's going to happen in terms of the consumer side. So are we going to get a combined HBO Max Paramount Plus streaming service? Are we going to get a bundle? Like, Disney Plus and Hulu have been a bundle for a long time. But slowly but surely, Disney has been working to integrate Hulu into Disney Plus long term. And it looks like in the next few months that will be complete and Hulu will cease to exist. So maybe that will be the plan. I mean, if they're working on the Disney template, which is there. But as of right now, it looks like they're looking to, at least in the back end, combine the tech stack. But for the consumer side, you might still be paying for HBO Max and Paramount Plus separately for a while. And like I said, Disney and Hulu, it took a long time, and it had to do with Disney also didn't own all of Hulu for a while, but even once they did, it took a while for them to make that transition, which is still ongoing. They did also say, David Ellison himself said this, that they'll be looking to, basically find efficiencies in their real estate footprint. A lot of people think that could directly mean, and me too, what comes to mind immediately is there's two studio backlots. So are you going to sell off one of them? Or are you, because they're not exactly next to each other. They're both in LA. They're a few miles apart. One is in Melrose Avenue. The other one's in Burbank. So they're, if you're familiar with LA, that's not too far apart, but it's also not, they're not next door neighbors. So it's not a matter of knock down a wall and then now they're one big backlot. So do you really need, all that infrastructure? But if you're going to do 30 movies, which is roughly what the two companies do combined right now, maybe you do. So, but they didn't really specify what that meant, but it looks like, at the very least, I'd imagine they're going to probably, look to get rid of some real estate where they have other headquarters on the East Coast and other parts of the world where you don't necessarily now need, for example, in India, for example, you don't need an office for Warner Brothers Discovery and an office for Paramount Plus, right? Or in New York City, you don't need two. You can, and that costs a lot of money, both to, if you own it, if you lease it, it costs a lot of money to operate. So you could achieve a lot of savings there. I mean, so $6 billion is still a big number. And then corporate overheads they talked about as well, which, I've talked about before, administrative cost. They also talked about enterprise management software. So, or enterprise resource management software, where basically, how you get paid and where you do your trainings and stuff, and, where you look at your pay stub. Each company has its own system or set of systems that it uses. They're going to look to combine the ones that both companies are using into one platform, which makes sense for efficiency purposes. It also saves a ton of money for the company. So basically they were trying to avoid saying, and they didn't say that they were looking to do a lot of layoffs, but they weren't specific about that. So we'll see, whether, I guess how many people will get laid off, because people will get laid off, but they avoided that. They kind of talked their way around any specificity, which probably is also because, it's too early for them to even know how many people they'll lay off. So they didn't give us any headcount numbers. So even in the Q&A session when they were asked about that, they didn't give us a head count. They were just like, look, we're going to try to avoid layoffs, because if they're going to keep the production level similar to where it is now for the two companies, you're going to need a lot of those people, like at least on the creative and production side. Then they also talked about UFC and other deals that Paramount Skydance has recently signed over the past year. And they mentioned that there's no plans to sell off or spin off any of the cable assets. I mean, I'm pretty sure when that question was posed that a lot of it had to do, it was implied, nobody said it, but people have been wondering, like CNN, are you going to sell off CNN? Is like, what's going to happen with something like that? You have CBS News, you have CNN. Are they going to combine them? They're two iconic names. And also, like, what are you going to do with like all the sports properties you have? Like, there's areas of efficiency. For example, NCAA basketball, like the March Madness, which is coming up very, very soon. There's a deal where that's shared by, Paramount and Warner Brothers right now. So that's why when you see March Madness games in the US, some of them are on TBS, some of them are on TNT, some of them are on CBS. And so all the two sets of networks from Paramount and Warner Brothers have a shared deal and March Madness and NCAA basketball. Now that gets combined in under one roof, and there's still like 8 years left on it. Then you have the UFC deal, which they just signed for pretty much 8 years, and basically what they were saying is there's flexibility in the deal, so that right now those UFC events are shown on Paramount Plus, and then some events might be shown on CBS. There's a plan for that, but then there's flexibility in the contracts where once the combined company is in place, some of those events could show up on TNT. So like, as part of TNT Sports. So you could see it on TNT on cable, as well as on HBO Max. They implied at least, they could simulcast UFC events on HBO Max and, Paramount Plus. So yeah, I mean, that was interesting to hear about. Then on the movie side, they said that they will license movies and TV shows to other studios and platforms still. So, I've mentioned many a times that Warner Brothers makes a ton of shows and movies for Netflix, and, other, like ABC, for example, Abbott Elementary, Ted Lasso on Apple. Paramount Skydance also do the same thing. There's a lot of programming on Apple that comes from Skydance, as well as Netflix, Amazon Prime. A lot of I'm pretty sure like the Jack Ryan stuff, some of that was produced by Paramount Skydance. The Gorge was a movie that was a Paramount Skydance movie. There was Greyhound, the Tom Hanks movie that Paramount sold to Apple. There was the Tomorrow War. I think that was a Paramount Pictures film with Chris Pratt. That was an Amazon Prime not too long ago. So both companies have a history and tradition of not only making content for themselves and their streaming services and direct to consumer things like going in theaters or going on streaming platforms, but they will continue to make stuff for other platforms. So I guess Netflix will still be getting their shows from Warner Brothers and Paramount, or the new company that is combined together, for example. Then they were asked about AI on a couple of occasions, and again, they tried to, and they reiterated this. Speaking of AI, I mean, this image looks half AI, but David Ellison said, look, their perspective on this is that AI is a tool for artists, for creatives and storytellers, and that they're hoping to unlock creative potential with AI tools, but they would see them specifically as tools. They're not looking as them as replacement for creatives and storytellers. So that was very specific. There's the optimism about creative unlock in the hands of the greatest creatives in the world, but never a replacement for artists and storytellers and creatives. So yeah, I mean, that was very specific wording. I just wrote that quote down during the call. So yeah, I mean, those are a lot of the big updates. I mean, I'll dive into the specific details in a second, but I just want to get into your comments while I'm at it, because I know there's a lot of you guys in here now in the chat. We got Keo, hello, yo, how you doing? James Gunn, please stay. I'll save that comment for later because we'll get into that, don't you worry. Johnny Dome saying Netflix seems to not tell the full truth. The Paramount said Superman was successful. that's a sliding scale. It depends on what metrics. But I mean, Superman, I think overall was successful. Brogu saying, I'm really not trying to be a negative Nancy, but I don't trust the Ellisons. I've always been a good judge of character, and something doesn't smell bright with them. Well, I mean, look, there's not a lot of there's not a huge track record at this scale from the Ellisons. They haven't been doing. David Ellison has been a movie producer for a while, but to do it at this scale, there's no track record there, right? So even if you were to like take the politics out of it, there's a question around whether David Ellison has the ability to pull this off. Because there's one thing to like go buying things, but as a CEO, you have to run things, and you have to make profit. Like, are you going to take the easy way out? Are you going to, when it push comes to shove, are you going to fire people, or are you going to take bold decisions to try to create value and launch new IP? So far, under over the last year, they've gone out and signed a lot of deals to clearly like scale up what Paramount does. But Warner Brothers is like 4 times as big almost, so twice the size of workforce and much bigger studio operation. HBO is a much more prestigious streaming service and brand than anything Showtime ever was. So David Ellison's got a job on his hands, and his team has a job on his hands. James Gunn is a high commodity. Absolutely he is, Keo. I agree with you there. Any updates on Men in Black 5? No, I don't think I saw that, Decol. Unless you saw anything, you do let me know. Movie Spud says hello, everybody. Hello, Movie Spud. Hello, M2G as well. Just taking a drinks break because I'm going solo. Yeah, that platform, the combined Paramount HBO Max platform, would be big. I mean, David Ellison said that his goal would be to kind of achieve the scale and market, reach that compares to Netflix and Amazon Prime, or at least to Disney, because Netflix still has over 300 million subscribers, and Paramount Plus and HBO have around 200 total. And then there's some overlap. So, I mean, the actual number might be a little under 200, Even if you look at a year from now, if they were to have more people, additions to their subscriber base, they still have a long way to go. But like you certainly have it's a big step up from where they were separately as 2 different, streaming services. Yeah. I mean, again, I'm not going to speculate about the political plans, Brogu, for CNN. Again, I'm not going to be talking a ton of, any politics here outside of, what seems absolutely necessary. But CNN is an iconic brand, it's, forget the political aspect of it. CNN, when they say they're the most trusted name in news, it doesn't quite carry the weight that it used to, but CNN is still one of the most recognizable news brands, and not just in the US but abroad. Like abroad it carries even more value because most parts of the world you have CNN, you don't have an MSNBC, you don't have a Fox News, or you certainly don't have as much of a presence. So these are global companies, Paramount and Warner Brothers. So CNN carries a lot of weight in other parts of the world as well. So and I could tell you that from experience. So yeah, we'll see. I mean, again, I'm not judging one way or the other. I mean, they are going to let go of a lot of people, Keo. That is true, and that's always true in mergers and acquisitions. It's an unfortunate part of this whole situation, but Paramount went bidding because Warner Brothers wanted to sell itself off. So it's like I can't blame David Ellison for ponying up the cash to buy Warner Brothers, because it's kind of like think about it this way, right? Like if you were to blame anybody, like blame Warner Brothers. It's like, for example, like if I didn't want to sell my house and somebody came to me and gave me all the money in the world, I could still choose not to sell my house, right? Like David Zaslav and co. clearly wanted to sell Warner Brothers, right? They were making indicators internally and unofficially when David Ellison's Paramount first started bidding, and they called it unsolicited bids, where they were unsolicited bids, but Warner Brothers was making all the moves to kind of like, they were going to bankers trying to get a better idea of what the value of the company's assets were, and they were doing the legwork to eventually start up a sales process. They were about to like split, get into the process of splitting off part of the company of the cable networks. That was all meant to make Warner Brothers more viable as an acquisition target for something like an Amazon or an Apple, where they don't want to deal with broadcast television networks. David Ellison, of course, pops in and says, I want it all. Netflix still got the deal done, and then Paramount upped their number. But ultimately, they couldn't have sold Warner Brothers if Warner Brothers didn't want to be sold. So like I'm like, it's on that level, I don't blame Paramount for coming in. I mean, they paid the most amount of money, like fair enough. But what they're gonna do with it, that's a separate conversation, which we're having as well. So yeah, we'll get into this. Figure Drawing Hello, one of our members there, saying Superman was a success, period. It was the start of a new era. Even calling it a lost leader can be deemed a success. I absolutely agree with you. I mean, I think a lost leader is, a positive, it's a compliment. So yeah. Exactly, Keo. I mean, they wouldn't be making another movie if Superman was. I mean, they could have, still gone ahead with Man of Tomorrow if Superman was, sort of like in the gray area and maybe like more like Black Adam. Nobody really knew if it was truly successful or not. Because David Zaslav has the trust that there's a vision there and a plan for James Gunn and Peter Safran to move ahead with what they're doing. But I mean, Superman, it didn't blow the doors of the box office. Like it wasn't $1 billion movie, but it was successful, and it was successful enough to certainly keep moving in the direction James Gunn is wanting to go. I'm feeling better for the most part. I'm gonna be probably, taking sips of my drinks here. I've got some Gatorade and ginger ale, but John sort of had a relapse, Figure Drawing, so like he's not on today, but he'll be back soon. So, but in the call, as I mentioned, they pushed back on the idea that there were going to be a lot of layoffs, saying that a lot of the savings will come from other areas like, real estate, some office space, maybe part of the studio backlots, as well as like the tech stacks, that combining the two streaming services on the back end at least. So maybe for us, it will still be HBO Max and Paramount as two services, but on the back end, they'll, from a technical standpoint, the service spaces and all that stuff is going to be one. So yeah, I mean, non-labor sources savings, $6 billion. I can see that $6 billion could come from that. But the question isn't even just the $6 billion they want to save, that they've announced. I think the question becomes, what about 3 years down the road? They've got certain targets they've set about, the credit rating of the new company, how they're going to improve it for Wall Street over the course of the next few years by like 2030. And my concern would be, you're like in 2028, 2029, and you've achieved the $6 billion in savings, you said. But now the company is still struggling. You're paying a lot of debt off, using a ton of the money you're bringing in, the revenue, to pay off your debt and to service the debt. And that kind of hampers you from being able to invest in new things. Now, of course, David Ellison's father, Larry Ellison, has backed a lot of this deal with his own money. He could always write more checks, right? But you get to a point where like a business has to be self-sufficient and profitable. And that's where I get concerned. I'm like, will David Ellison be able to get this new company to a point where they're not having to get more investment to expand or to keep, their balance sheet, balanced? Like that's the question. And that's what the David Ellison not having done this before at this level, that's a big question that comes into play. Now, one of the other things they said, because immediately they were asked in the Q&A session, I think the very first question asked them that, hey, are you going to divest anything? Are you going to sell off or spin off any part of the company? And they immediately were like, nope, we're not going to divest anything. I mean, I think the question, you'd imagine like when it was asked, maybe they were, hinting at, and this is my, opinion, that, something like a CNN or the BET, or like, are you going to sell off the Discovery, channel, stuff like that. But they said, we're going to keep them all. And in fact, they said like they look at these iconic brands, like for example, Nickelodeon is iconic as a network, but Nickelodeon as a brand is iconic, and there's a lot of potential Paramount sees. And Nickelodeon obviously is already a Paramount thing, but like even like a TNT, or you've got Cartoon Network, Adult Swim, they're looking at them as valuable brands and IPs that could transition into the digital and direct-to-consumer world down the road. For example, with Versant, which is doing their first earnings call next week, or tomorrow actually, sorry. They are a spinoff from NBC Universal, and Versant has USA Sports, USA Network. They've got Sci-Fi Network. They've got Rotten Tomatoes. They've got the Golf Channel. They've got a bunch of different things where you got like, those are names that you recognize. And Versant's strategy, as they have said publicly, in part is to transition those away from linear television to digital first brands, like, whether it's one big streaming service or multiple different, digital platforms. Even, right now, like for the past year, excuse me, they've relaunched CNN Plus, which is like its own little subscription service. So in addition to CNN that you can get on TV, you can sign up for CNN Plus, and it's not like the first CNN Plus, which was like a legit streaming service, but this CNN Plus is more like if you subscribe to the New York Times and you get like additional, coverage. I mean, it's like, a lot of YouTubers have, like our channel has, a membership, so you're paying for that. So I think they're implying like Comedy Central could have a Comedy Central, plus version of it down the road, or like they could build those into like, streaming brands that are on the streaming service. So there's a BET specific, like BET Plus is its own streaming service that could get rolled into the new streaming service that the combined company will have. Then yeah, I mean, look, a lot of people are taking the headlines here in Deadline too. They're saying like they're going to be looking to combine Paramount Plus and HBO Max to create a viable rival to Netflix. David Ellison did say that they could see, the combined streaming service to be a viable rival to Netflix, but he also said that, for the foreseeable future, they're going to be looking to at least combine in the back end, and they didn't really specify what their plan was, or, like they don't know what the name is going to be. Is going to be Paramount plus HBO? Is it going to be HBO Paramount, like, or just Max? I'm kidding. It's not going to be just Max. Or Para Warner, like Warner Para, like, I don't know. They don't have names. They don't have a timeline for when the companies, will when the two streaming services will combine into one. They'll start with the tech stack and then they'll work from there. So, which is what Disney has been doing, for the last several years since it bought, Hulu and Fox assets. Now, the other thing I wanted to kind of mention, because speaking of the streaming services, there was this report that came out, and Antenna is like a analytics reporting company, which tracks. They don't have all the information because they don't track them abroad, but in the US they're able to kind of track and measure the overlap in subscribers between different streaming services. And they put out a report saying that more than a quarter of HBO Max subscribers in the US already have Paramount Plus. Now, in the US, the number of subscribers that HBO Max has, as per this article, is overall they've got 131 million worldwide, but then for HBO Max in the US, HBO Max, not the HBO linear, has 27.1 million paying subscribers. Paramount Plus has 35.8 paying subscribers, and of that, there's an overlap between basically roughly a quarter of them. Now they're using that as, let's say, we project that number to the worldwide number. Between HBO and Paramount, they have roughly 210 million subscribers. Around 80 million of that come from Paramount, and the rest, about 130 odd million, come from HBO Max. And once this deal is done, in about a year's time, you'd imagine that number would be a little bit higher. But when you take that number and then you kind of like project it to, like, if a quarter of that number is overlap, then if it's 210 million, that means there's roughly 40-50 million that are, already have the two streaming services, meaning that if you were to combine them into one down the road, they won't be subscribing to you twice. So your number immediately comes down to, let's say, around like 150, 160 million. I mean, these are all complete estimates, but it does go to show you that when you compare that to Disney has over 200 million, streaming subscribers, between Hulu, Disney Plus, and ESPN Unlimited. And then with Netflix, they just announced in the latest quarter, they have 325 million subscribers. They're far, ahead of everybody else. Amazon Prime doesn't really report theirs, but all estimates from, most sources say that they're somewhere in the $200 to $300 million subscriber range. So, it's the hierarchy tends to be Disney, Amazon Prime, Netflix, and HBO Max and Paramount. They're looking at slotting somewhere around Disney Plus and be competitive there. Whereas you could tell, even HBO by itself, HBO Max, there's a gulf. Like 130 million versus around 200 million is a big difference. And so with adding Paramount Plus into it and then hoping to expand the new combined company, when David Ellison says we can be more competitive and a viable competitor to Netflix or rival to Netflix, I understand where he's coming from, but it's still, they've got a ways to go. All right, let me take a look at some of your comments. You got Nelson in the chat. Hello, Nelson. How are you doing today? What if James Gunn comes to Disney? Grogu has plans to wine and dine him to get his own movie. I'm sure if James Gunn went to Disney, he would love to make a movie with Grogu and Brogu. Right, exactly. Figure drawing executives need to be able to do a lot more than just hire and fire people, and that's the thing about David Ellison. He's been the CEO of Skydance for a while, but there's that was a much smaller company than even Paramount and certainly Warner Brothers and the new combined company. Hello, Ron. How are you doing up there in Canada? I did see the John Campea video, and we'll talk about it later when we talk about the DCU and James Gunn. So we will definitely talk about it. If they combine, call it HBO, which is more prestigious and has success and awards movies. But I think so. If it was a process of elimination, I think the HBO name ultimately comes out on top. Paramount will be part of like the overall company name anyway, so it's not like the Paramount name will disappear anyway. But HBO, the prestige of HBO matters. Well, if John Campea convinced you, then that's fine, but I will get into that later. Don't you worry. I don't think the DCU is cooked. I've got a cat back there that's trying to get into things, and I hope that he's okay. But anyway, I'll check on him later. If James Gunn leaves DC, I'm boycotting DC movies. Well, Ron, let's not jump ahead, and I'll get into that later. But again, stick with me here. I think there's a lot of hyperbole online. I'm gonna give you guys a preview of it. Admittedly, so I think John Campea said to himself, like, look, he was guessing. There are just his opinions. I think he made that pretty clear that he wasn't trying to give us straight facts in the sense that there was a lot of research or like he had some inside track with what James Gunn's thinking right now. James Gunn's not really thinking about this probably all that much because he knows like there's not much that he can do until he hears from David Ellison or whoever else is going to reach out to him and tell him like what's going on. So am I frozen for you guys right now? Let me see if I can fix my camera. If you guys can still hear me, let me know. Ron is very upset about the Paramount merger. Maybe the penguin got to me there. I'll see if I can fix the camera here for a second. If I'm still here though, or if you guys can still hear me, that would be great because then I don't have to start this whole thing all over again. But anyway, let's keep this ball rolling while I try to fix the camera situation. Yeah, I'm gonna fix the camera. Thank you, Brogu, for letting me know that I'm still up and running here. I'm gonna see if I can get the camera situation sorted out. You can see my face. I know, right? The penguin is still coming after me. But okay, so the other big thing was that HBO is gonna stay HBO. Like he said, David Ellison said, HBO should stay HBO. We wanna keep them independent because he said, quite frankly, do a great job as is, and so they don't want to like touch that. They don't want to mess with that. So I understand that they want to keep HBO All right, I'm half back. I'm trying to like get the video back up, guys. I apologize for this. No, I'm here. I'm here. Don't you worry. I hope you guys can hear me, but I'll try to like get this situation well get get my picture back. But yeah, talking about HBO. I mean, what do you guys think? Do you think HBO should stay completely independent? Because to me, like that's a big one. Like having HBO be its own thing. Like Netflix, one of the things that they mentioned actually was that they want to keep HBO the name alive, but they also want to potentially keep like they want to maybe merge the streaming services, but maybe keep like HBO around as like a premium upgrade. So the question becomes, is it going to be like like FX is with Disney Plus and Hulu, where it's like a prestige brand within like the larger company, or like that's a question that I'm kind of concerned about, because I'd be worried like whether HBO would become nothing more than like, because like HBO like as a streaming service is one thing, but like no, not a lot of people subscribe to HBO through its the cable, because not a lot of people have cable. So like I'd be worried about like how all that's gonna work. So that's one of my concerns, and how that's going to function. Uh, but you guys let me know what you think about that. I mean, FX I think is a great example. MTG, I think that would be one way that this could all potentially work. Uh, but I feel like that would almost still be like a bit of a downgrade, because like what I would want to see is like HBO Max feels like it's like true, like it's like to its potential, like HBO is front and center as something bigger than just uh like a label. Like it's not just like, oh, you're watching an HBO produced thing. HBO is a platform, it's a streaming service, you can still get it on cable. But I mean, look, if you're living in a streaming world, I guess if HBO is still around in you know some capacity, and it's not and it's not being assimilated into, I don't know, like Showtime, or if that Showtime was still a thing, that is, then I suppose that's still, I feel like that's still a win, right? Like you might be looking at that as like, okay, at least that's still a win for us. So if you're a big fan of HBO, but yeah, I mean, there's always, again, it's a matter of like expectation versus reality. So uh, I know though for a fact that a lot of a lot of people. Oh, there we go. Now I'm back. Okay, I think you guys can hear me now proper. But anyway, as I was saying, I was getting an echo in my ears. But anyway, what I was trying to say is, HBO by itself, at least on the editorial side, you're gonna have a lot of the people that make the shows, like the people who work in Game of Thrones, the people who worked on Chernobyl, the people who are continuing to work on The Last of Us. Those folks will continue to stick around, and I think that's a good thing. Casey Bloys, I think their goal is to keep them around. They didn't say anything specifically about Casey Bloys. I think it would be, other than saying that Casey is a great person and he's done really well with HBO. So that's good to hear that they recognize that HBO works really well. So like, why fix some? It's like a if it ain't broke, don't fix it situation. So I do appreciate that, but then when you look at it from a perspective of like, is HBO going to lose like that front and center value? Like right now, HBO is the streaming service, HBO is the prestige brand, and if it's gonna end up being like an upgrade on a new Paramount Plus service, that would still feels like a bit of a downgrade. So anyway, but Keo saying Paramount knows that DC is Warner Brothers baby, and they know James Gunn is the one that they also know he's valuable to the company. Yep, no, absolutely they do. By the way, there was an article that I was reading up in Variety that was talking about like insider reporting, just anonymously citing a lot of people who are like at HBO, and the feeling within the company as to like what's going on. Because Ted Sarandos, one of the first calls he made after he signed the deal to buy Warner Brothers at the time, he called Casey Bloys, the head of HBO, whereas as of today, even now, it doesn't seem like, and again, as of last reporting, it doesn't seem like David Ellison had reached out to Casey Bloys. So while David Ellison might be saying that, he really values HBO and he thinks Casey Bloys is great and what he does he truly, value him to the point where he's making those phone calls and, establishing those relationships, like when the rubber meets the road, is this approach the same? Because your actions, speak louder than your words, right? So at the end of the day, the other thing that's significant, Cindy Holland, you see here on the right of the image, she's basically the Casey Bloys equivalent on the Paramount side. So there becomes a question, like once you start combining all these, parts of the company, like, will Casey Bloys eventually report to Cindy Holland? Will Cindy Holland work with Casey Bloys side by side? Because, right now under the Warner Brothers Discovery, Casey Bloys reports directly to David Zaslav, the CEO. So will Casey Bloys do the same, and go directly to David Ellison? So those are questions that are worth answering. But also, Casey Bloys' contract conveniently runs out in 2027. So there's a feeling that he might just wait to see how things shake out and then decide to just maybe leave when his contract runs out if he doesn't see like what he sees, or maybe he'll re-up and then that will be his signal that I'm going to stick around, and so a lot of the people who are loyal to him will stick around too. So there's a few questions there that are still kind of up in the air, but a lot of people at Warner Brothers still feeling whiplash. They're really concerned. Some people are like, look, we just put our heads down and do the work. There's so much happening right now at HBO. They've got so much coming out this year. You got Lanterns, you've got House of the Dragon, they've got the Harry Potter show on the way in early next year. So as with any company, there's people who are going to be really worried, people who are going to be just not worried at all. They're like, whatever, I just got here a few months ago. And then there's people who are just like, I'm going to put my head down and do the work and then see how things shake out. But rest assured, a lot of people are worried about their jobs naturally, as happens in these big deals. So let's keep going here. One thing that I really liked what David Ellison said, he pointed to his experience, at Skydance as a producer before he even was the owner of Paramount. David Ellison, of course, started off producing much smaller movies, but over the years he's worked his way up to, and again, I'm not saying he doesn't come from a place of privilege, so it's not like he's earned every little bit of life success, but even if you have money to play with, it doesn't always mean that you're gonna put that money behind winning ideas. But David Ellison has been a producer and a financial backer of a lot of Paramount movies, and he's somebody who was in agreement with Tom Cruise and agreed to keep Top Gun Maverick in theaters for months on end. It had one of the longest theatrical release windows of any movies in recent memory, and I remember it was #1 for like weeks in a row, and it was in the top 5 for a long time. I went to see it multiple times in theaters, and then when it came out on digital, it was #1 for rentals for a long time. And then when it came out on Paramount Plus, it was #1 on Paramount Plus, but it didn't hit Paramount Plus for like 6-7 months until after the movie came out, which seems insane to think about considering a lot of movies these days are on streaming less than a month after they come out. Superman was on streaming 35 days after it came out. So David Ellison was talking about how Top Gun Maverick was really a pivotal in his mindset to looking at how, a theatrical release window, that's where the truly lasting IP, the big franchises, are made. And he said that, we're going to do 30 movies, 15 at Paramount, 15 at Warner Brothers, and that movies should be seen in theaters. The quote that I noted down from David Ellison, let me see if I can pull this up. He said large franchises and big pieces of IP are launched in theaters, and they'll continue to create iconic TV IP for digital or for direct-to-consumer streaming, but theatrical will be focused for films. And then, of course, he pointed to Top Gun Maverick. But he also said that in the same year Top Gun Maverick came out, The Atom Project came out on Netflix and was, a big zeitgeist project for Netflix. But then he also pointed out that, The Atom Project was big for Netflix, but it wasn't anything like Top Gun Maverick, right? Like there's a difference, there's levels to this game. He didn't say that, I'm kind of like paraphrasing, but and to me that kind of speaks positively to the idea of like, when the CEO of the company believes that theatrical, is where those franchises are to be made and where you can get the most value out of them. I trust that means that, they'll, if it comes down to, are we going to put this movie out theatrically? Are we going to throw it on a streaming service? That more often than not, they're going to choose to put it out theatrically. And, as a fan of theatrically released movies, I think that's a good thing. So, I mean, you guys let me know. I think this bodes well for the new company. I mean, the volume of movies is one thing, but the theatrical experience, I think, is important, and committing to that. The other thing I wanted to mention before I get into this legal stuff is they mentioned that Paramount put out like 8 to 10 movies last year theatrically. They have a plan to do like 15 of them this year. And then, of course, the Paramount, Warner Brothers has a goal of 16 plus movies theatrically this year. So between Paramount and Warner Brothers, they're currently looking to put out anywhere between 30 to 32 movies. So their current goals separately are pretty similar to what David Ellison wants to do, between the two companies together. Which means like at most you may be losing 1 or 2 movies a year. That's not a big drop. Like Disney, like I mentioned, after buying Fox, really has not been putting out nearly as many movies as Fox was putting out by itself and Disney was putting out by itself. So I do look at that as a positive. So there's still speculation, there's still concern whether they can stick with that number and actually deliver 30 movies that feel as big and have the level of IP value. And there are big franchises, like, are there going to be enough DC movies? Are there going to be enough Transformers movies? Or like they've got 2 G.I. Joe movies that they've been writing at Paramount, and they're still doing a G.I. Joe Transformers crossover. They want to do more Star Trek movies. There's the Rush Hour film, of course, that Paramount will do. All the legendary pictures movies, including Street Fighter, and all the MonsterVerse movies that Warner Brothers has, any future Dune movies, as well as all the Warner Brothers animation stuff, which has been basically reset and is starting up from the beginning once again. So I mean, there's a lot of like different sources they can pull from. Like Universal has a lot of that. Like Universal has Illumination Entertainment. They've got DreamWorks Animation, like Shrek and stuff. Obviously, Minions at Illumination. They've got Focus Features, which are their more prestigious projects, like those indie prestige projects. Then, of course, you have Universal Pictures, Fast and the Furious, Jurassic World, all the big ones. And they also have Blumhouse, doing all the horror movies, as well as the new company that well, I'm forgetting. He used to Walter Hamada, but actually Walter Hamada is actually at Paramount. So Walter Hamada has got a studio at Paramount. So Universal, I think, puts out over 20 movies a year. So they do it with like 5 different studios under the new Paramount Warner Brothers Discovery Company. They will have New Line Cinema. They will have DC Studios. They will have Warner Brothers Pictures. They will have that new, indie label that's run by the A24 guys that just brought in. They'll have obviously Warner Brothers Pictures. They'll have Paramount Pictures. MTV Studios has been dead for a while. MTV Pictures at least, but maybe they can revive Nickelodeon, studios or something. So you've got options to play with, but 30 movies is still a big ask, and yeah, I do think David Ellison, like you're saying, MTG has always been a fan of theatrical. So I agree with that. I do believe him on that side. But again, it's one of those things where doing the talk and walking the walk are 2 very different things. And he's certainly, talking the talk. My question would be whether he can actually, walk the walk. So that's going to be interesting to see, if he can actually pull it off or not. One Battle After Another and Sinners are 2 things that I cannot tell you right now whether those kind of ideas would still be given the time of day or not, because I do worry so far they haven't really leaned into that stuff at Paramount, and Warner Brothers obviously has found a lot of success with movies like Sinners and One Battle After Another. So how much of that is going to be influenced by, let's say, the politics of the new ownership, or the perceived politics of the new ownership, at least, that's a concern. I mean, I can't tell you one way or the other where that's going to go. All I can do is hope that we still get more movies like Sinners. We still get more movies like One Battle After Another. A lot of that happens, by the way, at Warner Brothers because David Zaslav trusts Pam Abdy and Mike DeLuca to do their jobs. Pam Abdy, Mike DeLuca are able to do their jobs, put out those movies, make those decisions, bring in Ryan Coogler, give him the deal where the rights revert back to him after 10 plus years, and give PTA the opportunity and the budget to do what he needs to do. And that means you're empowering your creative studio heads. Will David Ellison do the same, or will he go over their heads and then just make decisions for them? Because if that happens, then you will see Mike DeLuca, Pam Abdy potentially walk out the door. You will probably see James Gunn, Peter Safran walk out the door. Maybe Casey Bloys walks out the door. So I think that's part of being a good leader. So, David Ellison so far hasn't been in that position. So it's kind of hard because you can't look at his past other than the last, year with Paramount, which is a very small sample size. So I wish I could tell you, like with David Zaslav, he had run, he has been in the TV movie business for a long time, especially the TV business. So you have some idea of what he has done in the past that can inform what he would be doing in the future. But David Ellison, you can't really point to that. So yeah, it's a big question. It's definitely a big question. But look, I'll tell you this much, right? David Ellison, Tim Cook was showing up to the Oscars because F1, he will be there this year because, F1 is nominated at the Oscars for Best Pictures. David Zaslav loves the glitz and glamour of Hollywood, sipping champagne at Cannes Film Festival, even during the writer's strike. So I'm sure David Ellison, loves the idea of showing up to the award season and walking the red carpets because he's got movies like Sinners and One Battle After Another that are up for like a dozen awards that night. But that happens for a few months out of the year. So the question is, what will him and his team do the rest of the 9 months of the year? So, Disney isn't putting out those kind of movies. Disney certainly doesn't take they don't take that many risks anymore. Pixar still, it feels like they managed to put out a few bangers that feel like they're doing that kind of storytelling, but it's always sort of got that layered storytelling where they're not like in your face about the messaging. In terms of telling these brave stories that don't necessarily go with the prevailing mainstream norms, let's call it that. So it's going to be interesting if the David Ellison-led company will be willing to greenlight those kind of ideas, or otherwise those directors and filmmakers will go elsewhere. Apple does it, Amazon Prime. It's a question of where, and ultimately if they can't go to the big studios, that's I think where Hollywood will lose out because if they don't get that platform to tell those stories, we don't get to see those stories, and that would be a really sad day for all of us who love movies. Look, David Ellison wants to invest in more AI as much as every other CEO in Hollywood. That's not something that is exclusive to David Ellison. Just look at Disney. They just signed a deal with OpenAI, right? They're not the only ones. I'll tell you, if you ask anybody at Universal, Comcast, if you ask somebody at Lionsgate even, they'll say AI is something that they will use. Thank you, Brogu, for congratulating Michael B. Jordan on his wins at the Actor Awards. We'll be getting into that shortly. But yeah, as far as AI goes, before I move on to the next thing, I did want to mention that they were asked about the AI, influence in the future, but on the call, they did say that they will look at AI as a tool for artists to basically, they want to develop it through that lens. They have optimism about creative unlock. They said optimism about creative unlock in the hands of the greatest creatives in the world, but never a replacement for artists and storytellers and creatives. That's what David Ellison said. So we'll see if they stick with that or not, No, you're fake 915. Thank you for joining in, and you're right. Disney does release some of those movie titles to 20th Century Studios, but even then, there's fewer movies like that out there. There's a reason why Warner Brothers is, currently, on the winning run that it is, because they're making those kind of movies. Ryan Coogler has done a lot of stuff at Disney, with Marvel and otherwise, and he went to Warner Brothers to do Sinners, right? So I think that's a credit to Mike DeLuca and Pam Abdy running Warner Brothers Pictures Group. So will David Ellison continue to let them do that and trust that they know the right decisions? So that will be interesting. Yeah, I mean, David Ellison wants AI for VFX and market research, says The Watcher. I mean, every company in entertainment right now does, and beyond. Every company on Wall Street wants to do that. So they said that they don't want it to replace talent. I'll say this. Most Hollywood studios, and it's not good, it's true of everybody. It doesn't matter if it's Disney, Universal, Sony, or Warner Brothers or Paramount. They will try to save money, as any business would, wherever they possibly can. And if AI helps them save money in some areas, they will definitely take advantage of it. So don't you worry. I think as far as AI goes, like, think about it this way. There's a lot of AI tooling that's built into stuff that you've been using for years. I use Adobe, Creative Cloud a lot. So within Photoshop, there's been AI, built-in AI tools for years and years. AI has been used a lot more as like a marketing thing in recent times than it used to be, and it's a marketing terminology. But like when it comes to AI, most people think AI, it's the Terminator Skynet AI. We're a ways off Skynet AI. Like the AI we have today are still, just algorithms. They're very advanced algorithms, but they're not self-aware. They're not, autonomously thinking and, making the kind of complex decisions that humans do. They're ultimately tools. And even then, a lot of AI tools are not very good. Like generative AI is only one kind of artificial intelligence. There's been a lot of things like within, editing software, design software for years that is technically like AI, but they didn't advertise it as such until like the big AI bubble has started to be created and will probably soon burst. So yeah, I think that AI will be more disruptive down the road, but I've always kind of taken like a slightly more pragmatic view to things. It's sort of, again, like if you go throughout history, anytime you look at the news and you're like, oh my God, the world's about to come to an end, just take a deep breath, zoom out, look through history. If you don't know history, do some research, Google it, watch a documentary, a few of them, and look at what's happened in the past. I was reading one of these articles about this whole situation that was in Variety, actually. Let me see if I can pull this up, because I have the article up. Let me see if I can show this to you, for example, because this isn't something I don't think a lot of people have put the dots together on. But it's interesting, and it goes to show you again that this has all happened before, it will all happen again, kind of a thing. The Battlestar Galactica quote that I like to use. In this Variety article, they were saying, ironically, Warner Communications was once a co-owner of Showtime before selling its share of that pay cabler to Viacom and merging with HBO owner Time Inc. in 1990. Now the successor companies of both Time Warner and Viacom, aka Warner Brothers Discovery and Paramount Skydance, which battled for years in the pay TV space, Showtime versus HBO, will now be united. Showtime essentially doesn't exist anymore. Its remnants, of course, have been consumed by Paramount Plus, like The Agency and other shows. They're all part of Paramount Plus. And now comes the great debate over the fate of HBO. So, and that's just going back to the 90s. Like you go back further than that. I've been pointing out the example. MGM is an acronym. Like it stands for Metro Goldwyn Mayer, Louis B. Mayer Pictures, Goldwyn Pictures. It was Metro. Well, I think it was Metro Pictures. So there were 3 different production company studios that merged into one, and that happened in the 30s. And and since then there's been many mergers like that. And as far as technology goes, when Apple introduced the iPhone, people thought that it would kill off every other competitor like Nokia and stuff, and they were right. But what happened? Android is a competitor. Like there's always going to be this idea of like something's gonna put somebody out of a job, like in Charlie and the Chocolate Factory. Like the dad works at a toothpaste manufacturing plant. Then they get a robots to assemble the toothpaste, and he gets fired, but then he gets rehired to service the robots. Like the jobs will be there, they will change, and I don't think human creativity will be replaced by AI, and certainly not in any foreseeable future, not the way a lot of people think. Like, it's not going to be, Skynet. It's not going to be, self-aware to the point where, it feels, like it thinks on the level that humans think. So while AI is the future, I think a lot of it is currently hyperbolic, and there's a big bubble that's going to probably burst in the next few years. And it's embryonic, like figure drawing is saying. So yeah, the sky is falling metaphor is very much, I think, valid. So, and while AI is getting better, again, there's a difference between what it does today, because today AI is still an algorithm that is predictive, generative AI. All it does is it takes a lot of data, crunches it, and then figures out what is the next answer and sort of guesses at it until it gets it right. And the better it guesses, the more accurate it is. And that's really what it boils down to. It's not able to take abstract ideas and then come up with like a new direction to go in, which you can also turn into a very complex set of algorithms down the road. That's how the human mind works. But there's a difference between that kind of abstract thinking and what AI today is able to do. And for it to kind of go from where it is today to where we are human thinking, there's a long ways to go. So again, very task-specific things, like even flying, a drone wingman for a fighter jet and stuff like that. Those are very specific tasks. You can charge computer algorithms and AI to do very specific things. AI has been a part of VFX workflows for years now. From when they used the de-aging Mark Hamill, they had a different actor on the set of The Mandalorian season 2, and then they did a lot of generative AI, and deep fakes is another way to refer to generative AI, and that's how they put together like that young Mark Hamill face based on his past performances, and then paste that onto track it, and then still do other, VFX techniques to get the look of a young Luke Skywalker. That's, been happening now for 5, 6, 7 years at least, if not longer. That was just when everybody started to realize, oh shit, it can be that good, even though that was still not the best thing ever. So yeah, I mean, there's a lot of hyperbolic thinking around this right now. But yeah, it's going to get more advanced, and then eventually AI will be able to do a lot of what's currently being done by real people. But then those real people, those creatives, will be doing other things, So that's my mindset. I'm not imposing that on anybody. If you are very worried about AI, that's fine. I work in creative field, right? So I worry that, sometimes, yeah, like maybe it will get to the point where like it will make me redundant. But then I also look at like the work that I do, and I'm like, can AI actually do what I do? Not yet. And it's not even like I can't do it today, but it can do it tomorrow or next year. There's a big gulf. There's a ton of black box problems where even the companies that own these AI algorithms don't know how some of these AI algorithms are coming up with the answers to the questions they're asking. So how do you then advance it? Like, how do you create a direction in which to take that next step of the evolution of the technology if you don't even know how it's functioning truly today? So, and yeah, you could say, oh, that's a perfect breeding ground for a Skynet like a super AI, but is it really? Is it really, like, what are the odds that you accidentally halfway stumble into Skynet? Unlikely that it's going to be, all of a sudden overnight, Ultron takes over and kills Jarvis, and there's a reason why that shit exists in the movies and not in real life, because we're not there yet. And I don't think we will ever get there, because again, those kind of movies are there to like help us ask those questions of ourselves and point a mirror at us, and then humans tend to catch on sooner than later. It's the whole idea of we might put our hand on a burning kettle, but eventually we'll feel the pain and yank our hand back. So and usually is before the kettle boils over and pours all the hot water on our hands. So that's the idea. That's how I look at it, at least. But anyway, on the legal side of things, Paramount did tout that they're already making good progress on the European regulatory side of things. Like, they're already been able to get a lot of approvals, but the European Union is yet to launch, and they're in the process of launching a comprehensive antitrust investigation. which they did for the AT&T buying Warner Brothers as well. They were doing that for the Netflix deal as well. So it's standard, but it could definitely slow down the deal, and that could cost Paramount an extra 25 cents a share in the deal or more. But ultimately, they don't expect this to become an issue that is they can't overcome. And then you have, of course, the state attorneys in the U.S., the California Attorney General, as well as working together with a number of other states in the U.S. This is somewhat along political, lines, but essentially there are multiple, state attorney generals that are looking to at least try to block or certainly sue to stop the merger between Paramount and Warner Brothers. And that's completely valid. I think this is something that has happened before. It's most of the time not been successful, certainly not in recent history, but we have seen, companies mergers be stopped in the past. The FCC did just pass through the Cox and Charter merger. So if you happen to have Cox or Charter for your cable and internet, those will be one company soon. And of course, AT&T got sued by the Department of Justice when they were buying, Warner Brothers back in the day. Well, now it seems like back in the day, but like less than 10 years ago. And eventually, after a year or so, it took longer, but eventually AT&T, went through the lawsuit and won, and then, went through the merger. So looking at this, I think they have some very valid concerns about people losing their jobs, and the attorney generals should do their due diligence, even if they have to sue them. And then ultimately, we will see what comes of it. Right now, if I were a betting man, I would be looking at this and thinking this is more likely to slow down Paramount from getting the ultimate approval, and it's not going to stop it necessarily. So, 180 saying, I saw on the internet that the Warner Brothers shareholders were being told about the Warner Brothers Discovery merger. So I don't know what you mean by that, other than I did hear that they're looking to currently set up a meeting to vote and approve this deal by the Warner Brothers Discovery shareholders sometime later this month, similar to when they were going to do the vote for Netflix. Of course, Netflix is no longer, in the running, so that meeting even if it does continue on as expected, it wouldn't be, necessarily the same date. So, the stockholders, the shareholders of Warner Brothers Discovery, they are aware of the deal. As far as when they get to vote to approve it, they are still expecting Paramount and Warner Brothers to set up that meeting for later this month. The previous meeting for the Netflix deal vote was going to be on March 20th. Now the WGA has of course condemned the idea of this Paramount Warner Brothers Discovery merger, saying the outcome is the same as the Netflix deal, that there will be less jobs and then there will be fewer places for writers to go and work. Which in essence is true, because you're going from two separate entities, two separate companies and studios, to one big combined entity. So it does change on a day-to-day practical level. As a writer, I mean, I guess if they keep the two studio backlots and they keep the businesses separate enough, you could go to Paramount, get denied, and then go pitch to Warner Brothers and get accepted, and vice versa, potentially. But it does, again, still, limit your opportunities somewhat, because in a lot of instances, if you get rejected on one side of the backlot, then chances are the other side of the backlot is going to say the same thing. Not always going to be true, but, I understand that the Writers Guild of America is not pleased with this deal development. But from a labor perspective, it hurts a lot of writers. I personally, with the way the unions work, I feel like the way the Hollywood system is set up is flawed, and the unions are helpful in helping to fight the flawed nature of how Hollywood works. Because I personally believe if you're working for a company, you shouldn't be getting your pension and all that stuff from a union necessarily. It shouldn't get to that point. The reason why these unions exist is because most writers are not full-time employees. They're not entitled to full-time employee benefits from the studios they work for, right? A lot of us probably have jobs where we have full-time benefits, retirement plans, and stuff that we get from the company we work for. Writers don't get that. They get hired on project-by-project basis as part-time freelance employees. A lot of times legally, the projects that are set up Like usually when you make a movie, you set up an LLC just for that movie, like a little limited liability company. You dump all the costs and everything within that company. And so from a business standpoint, that is completely like a little bubble on its own that is separate from the larger company that is actually doing the production. So you can, if the movie completely, that little LLC could go bankrupt and it wouldn't really affect the larger Paramount Pictures or Warner Brothers. And that's why writers and, directors and stuff, they're not full-time employees that get, retirement benefits and paid time off and stuff like that. And so the unions have to come in and do those things. And that's why the unions were created, to give, Hollywood workers like writers those same benefits. And I feel like that in and of itself is the fatal flaw that, long-term, until that's fixed, this back and forth will always continue. So, and you know what? It doesn't. Sometimes it works. In some instances, it works really well. Like the Directors Guild, seem to be doing really well for a while. The Producers Guild seem to be doing well for a while. But like the writers and actors clearly, are still struggling and had been for a long time, and that's why they went on strike. So I completely agree with what they're doing. But like it's. I look at it as like the larger system is very flawed, and I totally understand that the writers are not pleased about this, because there will be fewer places to go to get a writing gig, and potentially fewer writers' rooms as well. So, Man of Tomorrow is my most anticipated super comic movie, then Batman 2 and both Spider-Man stuff. Yeah, M2G, I mean, Man of Tomorrow, we're all hearing good things so far. I'll actually talk about what James Gunn mentioned recently as well. He's currently in Atlanta doing some more pre-production for the movie. So yeah. All right, let's keep going. I got a couple of more things here. Of course, Cinema United said that they are concerned over the fewer theatrical movies. That concern for them still stands, under the Paramount deal, much like what they were worried about with the Netflix deal to buy Warner Brothers, saying that heed the lessons of the past. Of course, of the president of CEO of the lobbying group, Michael O'Leary, right there. Now, of course, CinemaCon is about to happen. It's not that far away. It's just weeks away. And that's where, that's held by Cinema United. And a lot of studios go and present there and showcase the movies that are going to be coming out over the course of the next 12 months. And, well, it'll be interesting to see, how Paramount and Warner Brothers talk about the next 12 months of their movie slates. But if Paramount sticks to the 30 movies a year promise, then there shouldn't be a drop, in the number of movies they're both putting out right now as individual studios. But I understand what Cinema United is getting at, especially with heeding the lessons of the past, because Disney said that they were going to try, they didn't make specific number promises, but they said that they are buying all these Fox assets at the time to maximize their potential, right? Like all Wall Street talk. But as I've mentioned before, we don't see nearly as many movies from 20th Century Studios and the IP that they bought from Fox that we used to see when Fox was its own studio. So Disney, is an example where they bought a big studio, and then the combined output of the new company is less than that of the two companies before they merged. So Cinema United, clearly, I think, voicing their concern about, it's the same thing potentially happening here, which I think is a completely valid concern, until proven different. So yeah. By the way, the other thing I wanted to quickly touch upon is what actually happened the day that all of this went down and Netflix walked away and Paramount Skydance won the deal for Warner Brothers. This Variety article kind of like goes through a lot of this, and you guys are welcome to read the whole thing on by yourselves later. But basically, the day that Warner Brothers said that the Paramount deal was superior, Ted Sarandos was in DC. He was just meeting with the Attorney General Pam Bondi and then the Chief of Staff at the White House. And as he walked out of that meeting, they got the news that Warner Brothers had officially said the Paramount proposal was superior. And so very quickly, according to this article, Sarandos consulted the key team of executives, which included CFO Spencer Newman and his co-CEO Greg Peters, who had been, of course, overseeing the Netflix bid for Warner Brothers. And then under the terms of its agreement, of course, Netflix had 4 days to match Warner Brothers, to either match it or to surpass it with a better offer. But for Netflix, the numbers just didn't make sense. They only wanted Warner Brothers and the studio and streaming businesses, and of course they had a number in mind, $27.75 per share. And they just didn't think going up from that would have made any sense, or certainly to match Paramount, that it would had to make a significant bump on that offer. So Ted Sarandos was like, it doesn't make any sense to drag things out. We're just gonna, make a decision. We already pretty much know what our decision is. So this explains why Netflix walked away so quickly, because it seemed like they knew that the deal they had in place was basically their best and final offer. Paramount kept saying it wasn't their best and final offer, but Netflix knew that was it. If the needle was going to move up in any way, they were going to walk away. And so that's why they moved so quickly to say, we're done. It doesn't make sense to us. And you know what? Kudos to Netflix for being able to go and just say, we'll take our ball and walk, because it just doesn't make sense to us. Netflix doesn't need to get their hands on Warner Brothers Discovery the same way Paramount felt the desperation to. So and then of course Ted Sarandos went on Bloomberg afterward over the past few days, and he did an interview saying that, look, the price for Warner Brothers, for Netflix, it was just no longer financially attractive, and so that's why they immediately walked away. And they had a very tight range that they would be willing to pay, and they made that offer back when they closed the deal. So Ted Sarandos says we hadn't moved much from that except for moving to cash. So basically saying that they, the deal that they had with Warner Brothers, they had gone from part shares and then part cash to an all cash deal. But they weren't willing to go any higher because it just didn't make sense for them to go any higher. So they were happy with where they went in, and then they were happy when they got out, which is fine. Like, it's, they knew immediately that when the superior offer from Paramount came in, and then the details of it, they already knew what they were going to do next, which goes to show you that Netflix was very disciplined, and they weren't waiting to see what Paramount does. They already knew, no matter what Paramount does, what they would do next. Then also, Ted Sarandos went on to throw some shade on David Ellison, saying that the Paramount deal should be highly scrutinized the way I'm glad that our deal was highly scrutinized. It should be looked at every bit of the same microscope. Remember, we were asked to go and testify. David Ellison and I both were. I came, said Ted Sarandos. David Ellison did not. But he also described like the whole battle with Paramount, however brief it was, is very unusual, irrational, whatever word you want to use in that, saying it will be fascinating to see the next steps. I have been on the record a lot in the last 2 weeks talking about what I think the future looks like. I'm confident in our future that we're not impacted by all that. The fact, maybe it's to our advantage, but I hope I'm wrong for the sake of the industry. Possibly, again, then he was asked about, like, what do you think if Warner Brothers Discovery or Warner Brothers Pictures potentially could be up for grabs down the road? Because like people are thinking maybe David Ellison will run it into the ground and then be looking to sell it in a few years. Ted Sarandos to that said, possibly. Possibly I'd be interested. Or if you look at the history of Warner Brothers, and like it was like, well, they've been sold like 4 times in just the past 10 years. So what are the odds, that they might be up for sale again? So I like that Ted Sarandos is walking away with a wry smile on his face. And you know what, to be fair, Netflix is in really good place right now financially, and I don't think they needed to make this deal work at any price, and that's why they walked away. So all good. Autocorrect does weird things, guys. Don't worry about the comments. I know what you guys mean. But yeah, I mean, look, we're all hoping that Warner Brothers is not for sale again in a few years, but I guess if it were, Ted Sarandos is leaving the door open if Netflix would be willing to go in and scoop it up. So I guess we'll see how that plays out. But yeah, you know what? There's a lot more to happen between now and then, or potential future. And you guys let me know in the chat that, or in the comments down below, what do you think about the future of Paramount Warner Brothers Discovery? This combined company is going to have, they're going to have a lot of different franchises under their belt. They're a company that will have Nickelodeon, Comedy Central, Warner Brothers Pictures. I mean, with franchises like Lord of the Rings, Harry Potter, Transformers, Star Trek, DC, and way more beyond that even. So yeah, I mean, if Warner Brothers goes on sale again, says Ron, we the Also Curious community need to buy it. Yeah, maybe if we have the financial might, we will definitely put our $35 offer in. So not $35 a share, just $35 as a whole. and maybe it will be enough. But we'll move forward from here. So because we could talk about this for a long, long time. David Ellison talked about selling real estate. What do you think they're selling? Says Your Fake 915. WBD Atlanta, New York offices because they need lots to make 15 films each. Well, so the studio backlots in Burbank and on Melrose Avenue are the ones that Warner Brothers and Paramount use to produce a lot of their movies. Beyond that, I mean, you have the Leavesden Studios that Warner Brother has in the UK. I don't think they would sell those. Certainly not the Leavesden ones. It's maybe they'll sell part of one of the lots in LA. As far as Warner Brothers Discovery Atlanta, I mean, that's where a lot of the television stuff happens. You got CNN, you've got a lot of the TNT sports stuff down there. So I don't think they will sell that because they use it for a lot of their sports programming. If anything, some of their other new sports rights will probably move there as well. I mean, for example, Warner Brothers Discovery has Olympic rights abroad. In the US, it's NBC, but Warner Brothers has that internationally in a lot of markets. So I can see that they won't be selling. I mean, they'll probably sell, let's say, for example, in New York, if they feel like in New York they can combine the two different headquarters into one, that would be something I would look at. You also have to remember Warner Brothers Discovery, there's still the Discovery part of the property, all the property that Discovery brought in, their offices and headquarters are also still around. I think now with this new company, Discovery becomes an even smaller part of the equation. So I would imagine, and this is me guessing, but I think that a lot of the Discovery, production spaces will probably get sold off, or like the office, spaces that they have, especially in cities like New York where it's very expensive to run those, and those could get, included into other company, offices and HQs in other parts of the world, or like on the East Coast or the West Coast of the US. But the Atlanta television, base that they have for all the TNT, for CNN and stuff, I don't think that will be sold. That's very, valuable space, and there's a lot of stuff that's all in under one roof there. CNN has production space in New York, as does CBS News. I'd imagine maybe there's some consolidation there. Like maybe you need really two completely separate production spaces for CNN, CBS. Again, it depends on the programming, how much programming are the two networks going to do. Paramount, for example, already has very small staffs of their linear networks. Warner Brothers has started to pare those down, but they're still bigger. Like also Warner Brothers has more networks as a whole. So it'll be interesting to see, how many people get let go on the network side of things. If you're working in sports, chances are you'll still have your job, and you might even get a few more people working next to you, because sports is really like, an area where both Paramount and Warner Brothers have a big presence. I worked on the sports side for Paramount for a while, and I know they've been hiring even in recent times, and probably will continue to do so in the future because they're still getting more rights and deals. And with sports, you have, volume, is a good quality to have unto itself, because the more sports rights you have, the more value you're providing to your fans who want to see a lot of things in one place. So, they have the Champions League, they've got Serie A, and then with Warner Brothers, you've got, of course, not only do you have some Big 12 football and stuff, you also have some tennis properties, you have PGA rights as well. So you've got a lot of different sports, of course, AEW on the Warner Brothers side, and then you have UFC with Paramount. So, and Zuffa Boxing. So there's a lot of different things they can do there and combine those things. But like offices will be sold. I mean, the unnecessary ones, I think that's definitely going to be true. And that happens in a lot of mergers. Even at Fox and Disney, they did that. So, well, if the Netflix stock if the Warner Brothers Discovery under Paramount stock fell to $13 a share, it's not as simple as Netflix going in and saying, we'll pay you $13 a share. Warner Brothers stock, even now, has never really gone past $30 a share, and Paramount just paid $31 a share. So the actual price of the stock has nothing to do oftentimes with what a company pays to buy another company out, oftentimes you're paying a lot more than the actual stock value of the company. So, but yeah, I mean, I don't think Netflix is coming back for Warner Brothers anytime soon. Warner Brothers is going to be part of Paramount or whatever the new company is called. And if there is a future sale, I would imagine it would be years down the road. So, and the Ellisons have enough money to, even if things get bad, they can absorb a lot of damage for a while until they decide to give up. So yeah, exactly. I mean, you're fake 915, exactly. But you know what? With that said, I'm going to leave it there for now. Of course, as things evolve and change and we get more news, and we'll follow the future of the Warner Brothers Paramount combined company. But until then, let's get into some movie talk madness. We got to get to the DC talk as well. So the first thing I wanted to do here is I wanted to get into the award season side of things, right? It is award season. Actually, let me just swap the graphic. Over the weekend, we actually, had a lot of different award shows happen. So I'm going to go through a few of them. Of course, the weekend started on Saturday with the PGA Awards, and then you can see here in the headline, the PGA Awards, of course, the big award of the night, Best Picture, essentially the Best Picture equivalent, was won by One Battle After Another. So they took, at the 37th Annual PGA Awards, they took home the night's top prize, the Zanuck Award. And then, of course, The Pit and Adolescence won the top TV prizes. So the big thing here is One Battle After Another won their Best Picture equivalent at the Producers Guild Awards. That is in line with a lot of other Best Picture wins leading up to now. Like they won Best Picture at I think they won Best Picture at Golden Globes and a few other ones. So they've got the momentum. And so when you look at the Oscars, usually if a movie consistently wins in some categories, that is a good predictor for, who's going to win at the Oscars, because there's a lot of overlap in the people who are voting. And particularly for Best Picture, producers there's a lot of the same producers who are in the Producers Guild of America that are also voting for Best Picture at the Academy. So will One Battle After Another win Best Picture at the Oscars in a couple of weeks? Well, then after Saturday's PGA Awards, we had, of course, the SAG Actor Awards happening on Sunday, and Sinners came out with the top prize, winning for Best Ensemble Cast, because they don't give out a Best Picture at the Actors Awards. Their best, their equivalent to Best Picture is Ensemble Cast. So that's that's basically the last award they give out. Sinners won that, and of course Michael B. Jordan got a trophy for that. He also, for the first time in this award season, really at any of the big significant awards, for the first time he's won the Best Actor award. I know you guys were congratulating Michael B. Jordan in the chat. Brogu was, and well, that could really shake things up for the Best Actor category at the Oscars, and I'll get into that in a second. But of course, on the TV side, the studio and The Pit led the way with a lot of trophies. So, and I'll talk about Seth Rogen in a minute. He had come up and get one particular award, which was definitely kind of heart-wrenching for a lot of us, in a good way too, kind of remembering Catherine O'Hara. But Sinners, of course, were the big winners of the night at the Actors Awards. After the PGA Awards gave One Battle After Another their big, award of the night, Sinners all of a sudden they turned the entire Oscars race upside down, because Michael B. Jordan hadn't really gotten any of those Best Actor, Best Male Actor Lead Role awards up until this point in the award season. So now he goes home with 2 trophies, one for Best Ensemble Cast and then one for Best, Lead Actor. If you ask a lot of insiders that the Variety article here is quoting, they seem to think that, it's not a done deal at the Academy Awards yet. Like, it's not like, there's an overwhelming favorite, and it's a lot of momentum. So with Michael B. Jordan winning at the Actor Awards, it could really set up Sinners very well to not only win Michael B. Jordan his first Best Actor award, but also for the movie to potentially take home the Best Picture award, which sounds really awesome. I mean, I personally, having seen both movies, if I had to pick, I would pick Sinners as the better film. And it's just, it's hard to describe like all the qualities, but I definitely think Sinners overall was more impressive to me. They're both amazing movies, but so far One Battle After Another has had the edge. So, I mean, can Sinners really turn the tide? With the Actors Awards giving out their two big awards to Sinners, with Michael B. Jordan picking out the Best Actor one, and the ensemble cast. That's big. Brogu saying, in my humble opinion, Sinners was the best movie of 2025. I think a lot of people will agree with you, Brogu. A lot of people will agree with you. Yeah, I mean, Harrison Ford giving credit to George Lucas. I'm going to actually get into that. You know what? I'm going to talk about it right now. Thank you for bringing that up. Harrison Ford got, of course, the Lifetime Achievement Award from SAG-AFTRA, Watcher, like you were saying, and he was holding back tears in his speech, which was really, really, heartwarming to see, of course. It feels like Harrison Ford is in that, part of his career now where he's just enjoying his work. Not that he didn't always do, but it's, once you get to his age and the experiences that he has had, you just have a certain appreciation for what's in front of you and, the life experiences that you're having now. And it seems like he's just, thankful, but at the same time, he doesn't count himself out. Harrison Ford doesn't think that he's, on his way, to the end of the road. He's like, look, he basically said, I'm at the half point of my career and I'm still a working actor. And Harrison Ford is not the kind of person you see talk like that very often. So when he says stuff, when he says that, and when he says it at the Actors Awards, taking home a Lifetime Achievement Award, which implies that you're somebody who's near the end of your road. Damn, like, he's completely stole the show. Like, if you guys haven't yet, go watch just the clip of his acceptance speech. And this combined with the Golden Globes last year with Jessica Williams, and that moment, Harrison Ford is having the time of his life. And clearly, if you're watching Shrinking, or if you've seen him in any of his other more recent projects, even the Taylor Sheridan project that he did in the Yellowstone franchise, it's just, he is a working actor. He's still a working actor. He's not somebody who's taking on roles just here and there. And Harrison Ford, accepting his Lifetime Achievement Award at the SAG Actors Awards, that was a moment. That was one of the highlights of the night. Definitely one of the highlights of the night. But then also one of the other highlights of the night, for an entirely different reason, was Seth Rogen coming up to accept Catherine O'Hara's posthumous actor award win. She won for Best Female Lead in a TV Series. And of course, Seth Rogen went up, and, he was emotional. And I mean, a lot of people in the crowd were. I watched it back and I was like, yeah, that's hard watch, because, of course, Catherine O'Hara is no longer with us. Seth Rogen said that, she showed us that you can be a genius and be kind. And of course, having posthumously won for Outstanding Female Actor in a Comedy Series for The Studio, which also on Apple TV, I cannot recommend that show highly enough. Shrinking, The Studio, and a billion other shows that John and I and Liz all the time talk about that are on Apple TV. They have some of the best stories in all of cinema and all of TV. So I mean, if you guys have not, please go check it out. The Studio is a fantastic. It's great parody. It's like watching kind of like The Office combined with, I'm trying to think of a good example. It's like The Office combined with, it's like a mockumentary style thing that's paired, like Ted Lasso a little bit as well, that's parodying and oftentimes hitting very close to home how real studios, in Hollywood operate, and like the people, what their experiences are like. And it's sort of like watching, a train crash in real time happen, or like a car crash happen in real time for comedic effect. And you're just like seeing a snowball roll downhill. If you get like secondhand embarrassment, then it's not the show for you. I mean, or you might still, have fun with it. And Catherine O'Hara was just an amazing part of the show, and she plays like the studio head who just got fired but then got a overall producing deal with the studio, while Seth Rogen's character is now got her job. So she's like this veteran who's still sticking around and helps out Seth Rogen's character a lot. So yeah, I mean, it's great to see that she was honored even posthumously for her work in the first season of the studio, and it was hard to see Seth Rogen come up and talk about it with obviously all the emotions behind the very recent loss of Catherine O'Hara to the community. So yeah, but again, just one of the highlights of the night. Anime Night, hello, how are you doing? Saying I still want the return of DC Superhero Girls 2019 is the only show that can go against Teen Titans Go. Well, I'm not sure if that's coming back, or if maybe it is in the works. So uh, I'll have to look into that and get back to you. I'm not sure if there is more of that coming. Maybe somebody in the chat will know. So do let us know what you think about that. But as far as the Actors Awards, Seth Rogen, of course, gave out, came up to accept quite a few for the studio, but he also commented on the WGA West, of course, the Writers Guild of America West, having canceled their 2026 edition of the awards. The East, WGA East, is going to continue on with theirs, but on the western side of things, on the West Coast, they had to cancel their awards because basically the WGA is split into two. There's two parts that make up the Writers Guild. You have WGA West, WGA East. The West, of course, is mostly people who work in around LA and California, and then on the East is mostly New York and tri-state area, and anybody working for another organization that's unionized as a writer, like if you on the Eastern Seaboard. So the WGA West staff have been striking for a while because they're just saying they're not being paid enough, and they've been taken advantage of. And as a result of that, because if you don't have your staff working for you, I mean, how are you going to put up an award show? So the WGA West canceled their LA award show. Of course, the East in New York will still have theirs, but Seth Rogen called it out, saying you were able, basically sort of in jest, telling the SAG-AFTRA, like, hey, you were able to pay your employees enough to keep the award show from being canceled. And then he probably would have done like some kind of laugh, just poking fun at the idea that clearly WGA West hasn't been able to do that, and henceforth we don't have that ceremony happening this year. So yeah, unfortunate, but that's where we are at. Now, I did want to quickly mention, I mean, of course, Michael B. Jordan has not only just won the Best Actor Award at the Actor Awards, but he also won some significant hardware at the NAACP Image Awards, which took place over the course of a few days. Of course, the big main event happened on Saturday, and of course, Sinners went in and won quite a few big ones, including Best Film and Lead Actor from Michael B. Jordan. So now Michael B. Jordan has the the Lead Actor Award from NAACP Image Awards, and then he also won at the Actors Awards. So he's got the momentum, everybody. Like the Actors Awards are one of the last few stops on our way to the Oscars. So going in, Michael B. Jordan just picked up a couple of significant ones, and hopefully we'll see if that has any bearing on the Oscars. I want Michael B. Jordan to win for Best Actor in a leading role at the Oscars. Also, Delroy Lindo, of course, was at the NAACP Image Awards. He thanked the audience for support and love following the BAFTA N-word incident. Of course, we've talked about it with Tourette's. The evening's host, Dion Cole, also told the crowd, if there are any white men out there with Tourette's, I advise you to tell them to read the room tonight. So kind of an in-jest comment, but of course, Delroy Lindo and Michael B. Jordan were not necessarily the subject of, but they were on stage giving out the visual effects awards at the BAFTAs a couple of weeks ago. And John Davidson, who was at the event, has Tourette's. He was there because the movie that is about him, a biopic, I Swear, was nominated, in fact won for Best Actor that night. He has Tourette's, and then while Delroy Lindo and Michael B. Jordan were on stage, one of his tics, and I guess one of his tics caused him to yell out some racial slurs, including the N-word, and at least one iteration of that ended up on the BBC broadcast, which, obviously is embarrassing. It's disrespectful, and even though with Tourette's, the tic is not a reflection of the person. John Davidson apologized afterward. He also left the event venue and watched the award show from a monitor per BAFTA event organizers, but still nobody from the BAFTA talked to Delroy Lindo and Michael B. Jordan afterwards. So it's good to see that Delroy Lindo was able to, get a lot more support at the NAACP Image Awards, and he thanked the audience for that. So I just wanted to point that out. Now, in just, much more bizarre news, I'm sure if you guys have been on the internet, or if you follow like the Hollywood news, you might have come across, there's been like for a long time like this Jim Carrey clone conspiracy, and it kind of went up to another notch at the César Awards, which are like the French film awards recently, because he won at the César Awards, and then he went and did a whole speech in French, and so people were like, that must be Jim Carrey's clone. That can't be him. Jim Carrey can't speak English. And well, the event planning committee later said, look, Jim Carrey worked on his speech in French for months, and his visit to the César Awards was planned since the summer. So yeah, it was an honorary appearance at the César Awards in Paris, and of course, it's a testament to the cult status of the wild performances that Jim Carrey has had in The Truman Show, The Mask. The man just went up and spoke fluent French out of nowhere, accepted the award, and people think he was just a clone, which is kind of wild. Anyway, hello, Emo Nerd Girl. How are you doing today? We're just wrapping up our awards news, and so let me know what you guys think about all the different award news that we just talked about, whether it's the NAACP Image Awards or the Actor Awards. Michael B. Jordan picking up a couple of big ones. The WGA West Awards got canceled, of course, because of the staff strike, and the PGA Awards giving one battle after another their equivalent of the Best Film Awards. So with the Actors Awards giving that to Sinners, with the NAACP Image Awards giving that to Sinners, it's a very interesting battle going into the Oscars. I feel like of all the big 6 categories, the big acting categories, Best Film, Best Director, only one category seems decided, and that's Hamnet, with Jessie Buckley, getting potentially the Best Actress award at the Oscars, because she's pretty much swept at every big award show so far, that Best Actress category. So I'm sure she's going to win for Best Actress for Hamnet at the Oscars. But outside of that, for Best Actor in a leading role, for Best Supporting Actor, Best Supporting Actress, for Best Director, for Best Picture, nobody really knows which way it's going to go. It looks very competitive, especially in Best Picture, where it seems like it's coming down to one battle after another on Sinners, which both are Warner Brothers pictures. So good problem for Warner Brothers to have, because it means they're most likely going to walk away with at least one of those trophies. So yeah. Yeah, I mean, the actors are the ones that nominate the actor, or vote for the nominees in the Best Actor category. So if Michael B. Jordan won it at the Actors Awards, that's usually a good, predictor for who's going to win at the Oscars. And if that's the case, then Michael B. Jordan might be able to call himself an Academy Award-winning actor in a couple of weeks' time. So let me know what you guys think about that in the comments down below. Of course, in the meantime, I'm going to move on to some Marvel news. I'm calling it MCU Weekly. It's not really MCU talk. It's sort of MCU adjacent, as it were. But of course, as you guys are aware, we do have a Spider-Man TV show on the way. It's going to be on Amazon Prime. It goes by the name of Spider Noir. It's got one of the OGs of all of film and TV, and Nicolas Cage, mostly film, but now also on TV. And he's going to be playing, a version of Spider-Man. And well, today we got some character posters which give us our first looks at Silvermane, Sandman, and Electro's powers, and of course even a mystery villain. So let's dive in through this 1930s film noir style TV show, which has a bunch of character posters. You can see a few of them right here. CCXP specials. Looks very interesting. You got Domingo Sabato. This looks fantastic. I love these designs. I love every single poster with Spider Noir, like the Spider-Man character in there. That to me is still by far the favorite one that I have. Sandman looks super noir, and of course Electro, that's a very different kind of Electro. I don't know what you guys think about this. Which one of these designs is your favorite? I'm enjoying all the marketing for this TV show so far. I'll be tuning in literally on day one if I could. And the trailer for this sold me almost completely, and now with these posters, I mean, come on, they can't do any wrong, seemingly, right? And speaking of which, they also now have what being called the most mature rating of any Spider-Man movie or TV show. You might be thinking rated R, TVMA. No, it's TV 14, but still, Prime Video Spider Noir, it's TV 14 is still gonna be the most mature rating for any Spider-Man thing that we have seen pretty much ever, because if it's an animated show, it's mostly G or PG. If it's a movie, they're all pretty much at most PG-13. So TV 14 is sort of like that one step down for TVMA, which of course is what we get with like a Daredevil Born Again. But the material, according to the ratings board, the motion pictures board, it's material that parents would find unsuitable for children under 14 years of age. So that, by default almost makes this the most mature take on a Spider-Man property. So TV 14, not quite, TVMA. Are you surprised by that? I personally thought that when I saw this headline that it would mean it's TVMA. Maybe it just means there's not that much blood on it. I mean, TV 14 could be borderline TVMA. It's kind of like, you could do a hard PG-13 that is right on the edge of rated R, but not quite. So, I mean, all around, Spider Noir is, for a lot of people, their most anticipated show of the year. I know John's gonna be watching this, and he doesn't watch a ton of Marvel these days, so I'm gonna be watching this on day one. I mean, it's Nick Cage. Like, come on now. Like, I'm not gonna watch this. And the comic itself that is based on is also very dark and mature as well. Thank you, Watcher, for pointing that out. But with that, I just wanted to kind of touch upon those 2 points. Let me know in the comments, what do you think? TV 14, is that hardcore enough for you? Should they have gone with a rated R, rating? Is TVMA enough? Does it do it for you? Or would you have liked a little more blood and maybe, a little more mature audience friendly content in Spider Noir? Love to hear from you in the comments down below. Of course, in the meantime, I'm going to get us over to the quicker part of news, because we have already spent like a good near 2 hours, actually now just hitting 2 hours on talking about all the other stuff. So let's get to the quick hits. I don't know if John's ever going to watch Wonder Man figure drawing. That's a very good question. I'm thinking of doing like a whole rewatch, because I love the show. I watched it over the course of 2 days, and I'm singing his praises weeks later. So, Spider Noir kills some of his criminals. Also, Uncle Ben was killed. We have Vulture, who basically ate him. Wow, that is dark. Holy shit, Watcher. Well, it's great figure. I mean, we should both do a rewatch and then see, if it's still as refreshing as the first time. I think it will be. It's just a great show, and it's a great show is a great show is a great show, and it's not gonna get stale like if you keep watching it over and over again, unless you're literally rewatching it like every week, of the month. So, which if that's your thing, then that's your thing. Jericho, John is out sick today, so he will be back soon. He's been dealing with a cold for a little while, so hopefully he'll be feeling better and be back for Tearless Tuesday tomorrow. That is one of his favorite shows, so I imagine he will have some motivation to kind of push through it, but I just hope, that he's going to be feeling better. There's no need for him to, fight through it all, We're here. We're still talking. We might get Liz on the show tomorrow, so we'll see, even if it's not John, then maybe Liz will be here. I'm trying to find the music for quick hits. Oh, there it is. Something like happened here, and all the stuff is like strewn around. Anyway, let's get into the quick hits. I found it. Okay. So, the quicker part of news, get well soon, John. We all hope that you get well soon. Thank you, Jericho, for that. Sonic the Hedgehog 4. It's teasing Amy Rose's storyline as the movie, of course, the sequel, the fourth quill, I guess, is now begun production. Jeff Fowler, who's directing the fourth movie in the franchise for Paramount, of course, good times for Paramount. He posted about this, and you see the logo here. He's holding the hammer. We got a little sneak peek. It looks like Sonic the Hedgehog 4 production is underway. You see the slate right there, ready for action. Sonic Movie 4 now filming. So in theaters worldwide, March 27th. So that is awesome. Sonic the Hedgehog 4. That's one of those franchises, again, that Paramount has been leaning on heavy, but now with Warner Brothers, they'll also have access to the Matrix franchise, which potentially still has a 5th movie in the works, and that's been confirmed by none other than Drew Goddard, who of course is the writer behind Project Hail Mary. We also love Drew Goddard in the House of DC, and well, it looks like he's still hard at work on the 5th movie in the Matrix franchise, saying that, well, you know, it's still in the works. He was recently interviewed by Screen Rant, and he told them, "I'm in my writing cave writing. I don't know how long I will be in that writing cave, but whenever I come out, I'll have news to share." So it looks like Drew Goddard, who of course also wrote Project Hail Mary, is currently working on a 5th Matrix movie. So we'll keep that as part of our news intro then. Okay, the Monopoly movie is moving forward now with Studio Lambert, passing the proverbial go mark on the Monopoly board at Netflix. It's because it was of course fighting alongside a few other companies, and now it's won that battle. Studio Lambert, the same people behind the Traitors franchise on Peacock, they're now going to be producing a reality game show that is based on the iconic Monopoly board game, of course alongside Hasbro Entertainment that owns the franchise. So yeah, that'll be interesting. You know, we're getting a Monopoly reality show over on Netflix from the people who do the Traitors. Let me know what you think about that. Hoppers, of course, from Pixar comes out soon, right around the time Project Hail Mary drops, and its Rotten Tomatoes score just got revealed. And well, the question is Pixar back to its, very, very best? And early impressions are that yes, even after just 53 reviews, it had a Rotten Tomatoes score of 96%, which is not bad at all. In fact, right now, let's see, it's sitting at 97%. So 97% is not bad at all. It's off 70 reviews total. That's a good number. 97%. That is on its way to certified fresh. I've read some of the headlines and some of the reviews, and I could tell you that a lot of people who have reviewed the movie think that it's surprisingly funny and heartwarming, and of course, all the things that you say about a good Pixar movie, which to me, sounds pretty good. So I might go check this out. I mean, Hoppers, the trailer looked good. It wasn't anything revolutionary, but you never know. Like, a lot of Pixar movies tend to sneak up on you, so I'm gonna be looking forward to seeing it. I know John is not convinced, but I'll go check it out for the both of us. So Tom Holland and Zendaya apparently are married, says their stylist Laura Roach. Of course, Laura Roach was at the Actors Awards, and she was on the red carpet, and she was interviewed by Access Hollywood, and she said that the wedding has already happened. You missed it. And then the reporter, of course, asked, "Is that true?" To which Roach said, "It's very true." She laughed and said, "It's very true." So it looks like Tom Holland and Zendaya have tied the knot. So congratulations to the happy couple. My brother just got engaged, actually. So congratulations to my brother and his new fiance. So some big stuff going down in that world, both for me personally, and of course for a lot of folks who are fans of both Holland and Zendaya. But Star Wars Starfighter, of course, Ryan Gosling adding another franchise to his gauntlet. He just revealed why he's joining the Lucasfilm franchise, because, well, you might be wondering, like, for somebody who did Blade Runner 2049 and Barbie, why Star Wars, right? And he was recently talking about this because, of course, he's promoting Project Hail Mary, another one that he's a part of, saying that the reason he joined Star Wars was it was Sean Levy's enthusiasm and his vision and the script. And I just avoided these things, Ryan Gosling said, because they never felt right. And I'm glad I did, because I feel like, similar to a book like this, it was worth waiting for, and it is like a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. So yeah, I mean, they've said they're not going to have any legacy characters in this movie, and they don't really follow the structures or any conventions of the Star Wars franchise. So there is apparently a lightsaber battle in this. So I guess that's not maybe entirely true, that they don't follow some of the conventions of the franchise. But Ryan Gosling saying that he joined it largely because Sean Levy's working on it, which is good. That's a good reason. HBO Max, of course, comes to the UK. For any of our viewers watching from the United Kingdom and Ireland, you'll be getting HBO Max on March 26th. So look out, hope, vengeance, and all. You'll be able to see Superman, the Batman, Peacemaker season 2, and of course, the upcoming Harry Potter series next year, and House of the Dragon, The Last of Us, and everything else that HBO Max has to offer. You will now be able to see it in the UK starting March 26th. So yeah, good for you guys in the UK and Ireland. You finally get access to HBO Max. It's been a long time coming. So, yep. You know what, Watcher? If he isn't Kate Skywalker, I would be also partially disappointed, but I don't think they're doing anything Skywalker related, honestly. That would be a real left turn based on how they've been talking about the movie. So, okay. Let's keep going. Of course, Cillian Murphy, every other interview he does, he keeps getting asked, are you going to be Voldemort? Did you get cast as Voldemort? Are you Voldemort in the new Harry Potter TV series? Well, it looks like he finally got tired. And in a recent interview with The Times, he said, look, I'm categorically not playing Voldemort. Can you make that the headline? And I'm trying to say it in with the exasperation that Cillian Murphy can sometimes bring across in his interviews, because he's a very straight shooter. He does not, mince his words. So it looks like he's definitively not going to be Voldemort. So, or at least he doesn't know he will be. And in the future, if it happens, I'm sure he will tell us different. So there you go. John Oliver, of course, the Last Week Tonight with John Oliver on HBO Max. He's famous for calling out his business daddies, over the years, like AT&T and Time Warner and whatnot. Well, speaking of the Paramount buying Warner Brothers news, he said, "It's not great news. How the F do I get out of here?" Apparently not a big fan of his new business daddy, David Ellison and co. So good luck to you, John Oliver. Hopefully, if HBO is left to its own devices and left to be independent, you will be just fine. Or not. We'll see. Netflix leaders reassure the staff at its town hall after ceding the Warner Brothers to Paramount by not raising its bid. This, of course, is something that happened, a few days ago, and both, Ted Sarandos and Greg Peters were there, and they talked about how them walking away from Warner Brothers deal after, having been locked into it for the last couple of months. It was just a matter of it wasn't a good price point for them. They just didn't want to overpay for this. And it was always a nice to have, like they said publicly, at the right price, but not a must have at any price. And they said, look, Netflix has got the momentum. They said they've got a strong year ahead of them, and all the way to 2030, they're looking to cross a few significant milestones. They just hit the 325 million subscriber mark. And they'll just grow, by building, what they already have, rather than going out and, obviously acquiring Warner Brothers. So they were pretty reassuring, which is good, because David Zaslav, the town hall that he did, was noted as being very tone deaf to the Warner Brothers employees that are all kinds of worried about potentially losing their jobs. So again, Ted Sarandos and Greg Peters seemingly, showing that they're better leaders than David Zaslav and even David Ellison. At this point, because David Ellison, there's just not a whole lot to speak of other than the very little that is on his resume. But yeah, Netflix, I think, is in still a very good position. They lost the deal to Paramount, but they still won along the way, which is good to see. Yeah. The watcher saying John Oliver's job may or may not be fine. LOL. I know, exactly. I guess we'll see. Thank you, watcher, for stopping by, and we'll see you next time. Netflix would have been so bad. Exactly. Yeah. Look, Netflix did want to put movies in theaters, but I think David Ellison has more of a proven track record of theatrical releases, which is why on that level I trust David Ellison will at least make good on that part of his promise with Warner Brothers assets. But hey, Christian Bale just said that his favorite movie monster is Godzilla, saying, I love Godzilla, all the different kinds, Shin Godzilla, Monsterverse Godzilla, all the older Japanese movies. These are things I love watching. That's a very Christian Bale way of talking. The way he talks is he just sounds like the most normal, average dude. And he was also, I saw an interview where he was saying I don't like to meet my heroes, it's because then when people meet me and I see the twinkle in their eye and then they find out that I'm just a normal dude. He didn't say a normal dude, but he was basically, I'm paraphrasing, but he was I see, it's kind of disappointing. So I don't like to meet my heroes, because I'm gonna then all of a sudden, these people I idolize will just look like every other person I've ever met. So yeah, I guess to that same Christian Bale, he loves Godzilla too. Not surprised. The only thing I'd be surprised to see is if he's able to, like, you know, morph himself into playing Godzilla, because, like, you know, he's certainly done a lot of that over the years, like just morphing himself into different roles. So the question is whether he can do that for Godzilla or not. That might be a roll too far, or a bridge too far, as it were. So good night to Brogu. Enjoy the rest of your week. Thank you, Brogu, for tuning in while you were here. The GMK Godzilla design was pretty cool. It was pretty cool. I did not see Pale Blue Eye, Emo Nerd Girl, but it's on my list of movies to watch, so I'm gonna see if I can get to it soon. I mean, they wasted it in Thor: Love and Thunder, so I hope he's got a few other big ones lined up. But also, John Cena recently, you know, was one of the Fan Expo events. He's been doing a lot of those recently, and I saw this video come up. Apparently, a lot of people think that he could play Duke Nukem in a future Street Fighter movie, which I'm like, you know what? I didn't think of this before, but literally John Cena looks like Duke Nukem. I mean, you know, his hairdo maybe not quite there yet today like it used to be, but I mean, you got Cody Rhodes as Guile, so it's all possible. I mean, you got Roman Reigns in the movie as well, so I mean, why not John Cena? Bring him in as Duke Nukem. I would totally watch it if especially, I mean, a younger John Cena definitely could have played Duke Nukem. But yeah, I mean, hopefully that Street Fighter movie is good enough that we get a sequel, and then they could add John Cena in the sequel. So I would love to see that. Anyway, yeah, look, I know I'm missing out. I mean, many people have talked to me about Pale Blue Eye, so don't worry, Emo Nerd Girl. I'm gonna get to it, and I'll let you know what I think about it. I mean, and Christian Bale, there's rarely anything where, you know, he ever misses the mark. So I for one, have high expectations every time I see Christian Bale in anything. I mean, Ford v Ferrari is one of my favorite, you know, movies of the last, you know, 10 odd years. And I mean, F1 I still enjoyed more as a summer blockbuster. I mean, Ford v Ferrari is, you know, emotional stakes, just better in some ways. I mean, a lot of it just driven by Christian Bale's acting. So, and not to mention, of course, you know, you got Michelle Monaghan, you had Matt Damon, of course, as well. So many other great actors in that movie. But that's the end of the quick hits, you know, trying to keep them quick and nice and frosty. But you know what that means? That means we're going to move on to talking about some DC news, and of course talking about that James Gunn stuff as well, whether he's going to stay or should he go. I guess I was trying to do the whole should he stay or should he go. Well, we'll talk about it because it's that time. I'm trying to find the waiter thing that I had. There it is. It's DC time. Let's get into DC talk.
It's another project that's been blessed from the beginning.
There's the shot right there. That.
Okay, we don't need to see
right there.
Hey, buddy. Eyes up here.
Now you want to get nuts?
Let's get nuts.
Here we go.
Victory mine. Ask me how am I doing? I'm telling you, really, I'm doing sublime. I never wait in a stewardess line. I just go do it. I'm moving my time. Really had nothing to do with it. How am I moving? I'm moving like you want to shine. Follow my lead. Don't listen to lies. I had to put me all in the line. That's why I know that victory's mine.
I prefer Jared Leto.
Hunka hunka.
All right. Yeah, it is an intriguing topic and interesting time for what is going on at the DCU. So welcome on in to another episode of DCU Daily proper. Of course, I am your host, if I can find my name. There it is, Daniel, of course. And we'll get into a number of quick hits today. Then we'll talk about, you know, the future of James Gunn in the DCU, or rather in DC Studios, because, you know, he's the architect of the DCU. But yeah, we all love mysteries, and such is that of James Gunn's, you know, potential future status at DC Studios. But with that, let me dive first into some quick hits. We got some DC quick hits, or as we like to call them, the parrots, ducks, and pelicans of DCU news. For those of us who suffer from bird blindness, we are here and we appreciate you nonetheless. So Jorge Jimenez, of course, Jorge Jimenez has been just all out, like every day, posting something new, something amazing, something, you know, I was going to use some other word to describe Superman, but something super, all about that Superman Spider-Man crossover. And his latest post from a few days ago, he said, "Friends, first look at our heroes in the unlettered interior pages. I hope you'll like it. Superman, Spider-Man are just around the corner, and we are now in the last call to pre-order it, so don't miss out." Well, March 25th, everybody. We are shelling for this seemingly every day on the show, shilling for it. But you get some unlettered interior pages here, which, God, that looks good. This is some amazing artwork, and to see, oh God, it's just the vibe of seeing Superman and Spider-Man in the same world. It looks like they're in the same city and everything, so I guess we'll find out how they end up in the same situation. Yeah, the artwork is fantastic. It just makes me personally want to see this in live action sometime, even if an animated movie. But those domains tend to get a little more complicated than if it were in a comic. But with that, I guess we'll starting. But that's a good starting point, as good as any. So I'm looking forward to Superman Spider-Man #1. Comes out March 25th. I believe the pre-orders are now open. So more amazing artwork shared here by Jorge Jimenez. And yeah, his Super Sons comic run was so good, says Figure Drawing. And Ron, it's set to come out in a couple of weeks. So yeah, I mean, it's looking more and more like a must get. So yeah, definitely go check it out if you can. Yeah, Jorge Jimenez. I mean, I follow him on Facebook. Actually, got recommended to as a friend request. I got Jorge Jimenez on my Facebook as like a friend, for me to send him a friend request as a recommendation. I was like, is Facebook telling me something? I don't know. Do I indirectly know Jorge? I don't know, but it will be interesting. Your fake 915 saying Jorge Jimenez and Dan Mora are carrying DC. Yeah, I mean, in a lot of ways they are. Absolutely, you're not wrong there. Let's move on to the next quick hit. Of course, Zack Snyder. This is now a week ago, but he posted a shot from Watchmen, which I think is still one of his best works, and certainly I personally prefer a lot of the Watchmen movie than the TV show on HBO, although the TV show on HBO also definitely had a lot of its own merits. But I don't know, I just like the visual style of Zack Snyder. It just felt like he didn't take it to an absolute extreme. I feel like with Watchmen you got a lot of Snyderisms in the movie, but it works. It works really well, and it holds up to the test of time. Zack Snyder posted a quote from Dan Dryberg when posting this image from the Watchmen movie saying, "God, I'm tired of being afraid of war, afraid of the mask killer, and afraid of this goddamn suit and how much I need it. Watchmen is one of the greatest comic books ever written. End of story." So yeah. My favorite Disneyland ride? Hard to tell. I'm not a big Disneyland person. So I wouldn't be able to really tell you that. Good question though, Stacy. Thank you. Maybe John will have an answer for you, or maybe Liz. Probably Liz will have a better answer than I will to that question. I did want to quickly also go over this because just yesterday, Zack Snyder celebrated his 60th birthday, posting 3 photos from across the years from his time spent in Wisconsin, where he was born, to Greenwich in his teenagehood, and to Pasadena, where he is now at 60 years old. So he hit the big 60. So this is what he looked like when he was 16, and of course this is what he looks like when he's 60. I will say his wife and co-producer in all of his work, Deborah Snyder, what she posted, I think, was a much more heartfelt message to her husband, saying, "You're like the love of my life, and I appreciate you." And then obviously, they've got a big family together. So yeah, Zack Snyder celebrating his 60th birthday yesterday. So happy belated birthday to Zack Snyder. Whether you loved, liked, or hated his movies, 60 years of life and a career that, whether you know him well or not, you like his movies or not, they certainly have left a mark on the world of comic book movies, and certainly on DC. So Zack Snyder, many happy returns to you. So with that, let's move on to the last quickie that I got for you guys. We got, dang is one word to describe it, Jericho. We have our first look at Absolute Scarecrow in the Absolute Batman universe. I will say though, it definitely feels a lot more basic, relative to some of the other Absolute Universe designs, but still nasty looking. So yeah, I don't know, it's, wow. He almost looks like the victim of the Riddler in the Batman. If the Riddler got to somebody and would leave him in that kind of a shape. Wow, Absolute Scarecrow. That is absolutely wild. But you know what? We're going to leave the quickets there. Let's talk about James Gunn and DC, shall we? Because, of course, Warner Brothers and Paramount are about to become one company. The deal got announced last week as Netflix walked away. And right as that was happening, there's a lot of commotion online, and a few pundits and other commentators in the movie news space, I think, partly reacting, partly speculating, and then just there's been a little bit of hyperbole as well. So I found this article on comicbookmovie.com, and I thought it's worth talking about. I will say right off the top, when they say speculation in the headline here, they very much mean speculation. Like, take that, and very literally, because yes, speculation is mounting that James Gunn could leave DC Studios in the wake of the Warner Brothers Discovery Paramount deal, but that is purely that. It's speculation, it's opinion, it's more, I think some of it feels, hyperbolic because it's very reactionary. I'm going to read the quote here because very specifically, I watch the John Campea show every once in a while, as well as a number of other shows that I like to watch on YouTube that are about movies when I'm not doing this show here. So I can imagine a lot of you guys might have already seen this or heard about it. Well, John Campea recently on his YouTube channel said, I am 100% sure that before the end of the year, James Gunn is going to go to David Zaslav and say, it's been nice, but there's no way I'm working for those guys, aka the new Paramount ownership under David Ellison. So can you please let me out of my contract? And I think David Zaslav will let him out of his contract. Campea went on to say, I think he's going to end up back at Marvel, and he will become Kevin Feige's heir apparent to take over Marvel after Kevin Feige finally leaves. That's what I think is going to happen. That's the roadmap that I see happening here. I think a lot of people are taking this as gospel almost, even though John Campea himself later said, like, look, it's his opinion, and some of it is just like, he said in his words, bitching and moaning, but like, which I get. If you're not happy with what happened with Paramount winning out and Netflix, not just like walking away, but not even putting up a fight. Like everybody was like, oh, now it's Netflix's move, and Netflix was like, we're done, bye. Within literally minutes of Warner Brothers saying the Paramount deal would be superior, Netflix walked away. So I think in the aftermath of that, just the day after, I think, is when this YouTube episode dropped from John Campea. I get the commentary. I understand that, the political aspect of it, and the implication that, David Ellison and his brand of politics don't necessarily align with what James Gunn would be doing. Matt Jarbo also posting something similar. James Gunn and Peter Safran's deal got extended, till 2027, basically to cover the transitional part of when DC Studios will be going from being under Warner Brothers Discovery to being under Warner Brothers Paramount, or whatever the new company is going to be called. That being said, I don't think like James Gunn is going to be leaving like just because the ownership has changed and it happens to be David Ellison and Paramount. And here's the reason why. And again, now I am kind of editorializing, but again, this whole story is based on, other people's opinions. So like they say in the article here, speculation. So let the speculation be speculation. Here's the reason why I don't think James Gunn is going to leave anytime soon. Not by the end of the year, not probably next year. Now, is it possible that could happen? Eventually, yes, absolutely. James Gunn certainly will be coming up, on needing a renewal or a new contract at some point next year. So, that's similar to Casey Bloys, the head of HBO, and those contracts are timed out. It's not a coincidence that they're timed out the way they are. Pam Abdi, Mike DeLuca at Warner Brothers just got a renewal that will go on for a few more years. So you can be bought out of your contract. There's always some kind of clause in the contract that if the ownership of the company you work for changes, that you could potentially, that could be a time for you to, find your way out of the company. You can say that triggers an opportunity for you to be able to, leave the job or have the company, the new ownership, buy you out for a set amount of money. So that's all true. I don't know what's in James Gunn's contract, James Gunn and Peter Safran's contract. But as far as DC Studios is concerned, David Ellison, and anytime he has talked about, DC Studios directly or indirectly, he said that, look, we want to keep the creative heads in charge. Why? Because they want to put out like 30 movies a year. Of those, 15 of them would come from the Warner Brothers side of the business. And of those 15 that Warner Brothers side of the business would be producing, James Gunn and Peter Safran are going to be responsible for 2 to 3 of those a year. That's a fifth of that production, and that's 10% of the entirety of the theatrical output of the new Warner Brothers Paramount company. Now, you might be thinking they can easily bring in other people to do the job, but like, it's not like James Gunn and Peter Safran are failing at their jobs. When David Zaslav walked in the door, he cleaned out house in a lot of places, including a lot of the leadership that was in charge of DC. At the time, not DC Studios, I think it was DC Films that was under Warner Brothers Pictures. But he did that because DC was languishing in, flop after mediocre movie, that didn't, even the movies that, made money didn't hit with the critics, and like long-term, opinion with audiences just was very sour. Black Adam, made enough money to be slightly profitable, but it still just was not reviewed very well. Even though like I would have liked to see Henry Cavill come back for something after Black Adam, but nonetheless, the DCEU was in dire straits, and DC as a whole, the brand was languishing after a string of movies that just got terrible reviews. And then of course, James Gunn, Peter Safran were brought in by David Zaslav, not just to run DC and get it back out of its hole, but also to run a brand new studio, DC Studios, that was kind of equivalent to Marvel Studios over at Disney, and give them a direct line to himself, the CEO of the company, so that they would be running DC Studios almost independently from the rest of the Warner Brothers Pictures group, kind of like Marvel Studios is in a lot of ways. So, although the metaphor only extends so far, or the analogy only extends so far, because technically Marvel Studios still sits in the Walt Disney Pictures group, so like Kevin Feige technically has to go through Alan Bergman in a lot of ways. But anyway, the point is, with DC Studios, you don't have that. DC Studios has pretty much got a direct line to David Zaslav. The question becomes, once the merger is done with Paramount, will DC Studios still have the direct line to David Ellison, the new CEO, presumptive CEO of the new company? And that is not just something for vanity's sake, that's to allow for speed, effectiveness, and independence of James Gunn and Peter Safran and what they do at DC Studios, having that direct line to the CEO, so they're not going through multiple layers of bureaucracy to get approvals on things, where they could easily just go and right now call David Zaslav and get his approval or answer on a question. That helps. That has a lot of practical benefits. It also allows for James and Peter Safran to work with as little oversight as possible. And so I would say James Gunn, Peter Safran doing what they do. David Ellison's politics might be one thing, but much like you and I don't bring a lot of our politics into our workplace, I don't think David Zaslav is going to be walking around, waving MAGA hats or whatever. I don't even think he really truly, is in that camp. I think my personal belief is that he's getting real close to that side of the political aisle to advance his business goals. And then, once the temperature changes in Washington over the years down the road, he will go in whichever direction he wants to go, which could be the other direction, because he actually donated to the Democrats leading up to Joe Biden's last election win. So, I don't think it's going to be as politically motivated of a decision. I also don't think James Gunn is just going to straight up, walk out of DC Studios simply because his new boss leans in one particular direction politically. Because the only reason why I think he would walk away is, David, if James Gunn decides to walk away, it would be because David Ellison is going over his head and making decisions about DC IP that don't go through James Gunn and Peter Safran. Because the worst thing you can do is to give your employees responsibility, but don't empower them to exercise that their responsibilities. And kind of like the whole thing of with great power comes great responsibility. Well, if they are in charge of DC Studios, then you should let James Gunn and Peter Safran do their job and not step in and try to do their job for them. Don't micromanage them. Don't go over their heads and make decisions. So if I'm being completely honest, I don't think politics are a reason why James Gunn would just walk away from a job. The best job of his life, where he's he's a studio head. Like, he's doing a lot more than directing and writing and producing a movie. He's doing that, of course, with Man of Tomorrow. He did it with Superman and Peacemaker, but like, he's doing a lot more than that. He's giving notes on Clayface. He's overseeing the release of Supergirl. He's helping cast, like, characters like Supergirl. He's going to be involved in every aspect of that. He's got the job of a lifetime. He loves this stuff. He loves the comics. He loves DC Comics. I don't think he's going to walk away simply because the ownership changed. And certainly not because of the politics. I mean, I think James Gunn, while he's very, strong, he's shown that he's a very strong believer in his own set of political beliefs, and that's completely valid and completely fine. Like, I don't think he's gonna just, like, straight up get up and walk out the door simply because somebody else came in and bought the company he works for. Like, there has to be more reason than that, not like just by default. I think James Gunn is much, his foresight is much better than that. If Jalen saying hello, Jalen, by the way, saying if James leaves, then that a big fat and that is a big fat if. I hope James Gunn is the one to pick who would run DC Studios, and it's someone who's a fan of DC, who loves all the characters and is willing to take risk beyond Batman. Well, yeah, I mean, look, I don't think James Gunn is going to leave. If he does, I mean, most likely he's not going to pick a successor, but I don't think he's going anywhere. Like, I genuinely don't think he's going anywhere. This is one of those things where somebody, influential on the internet said something, and now it's just rolled down the hill as a snowball and become something that has a life of its own. Whereas really, the source himself, John Campea, said it was his opinion, and some of it was definitely, like, very emotional. It was the day after the news was announced. So, and D. Ross Marco, I don't think he's going anywhere. He's not going anywhere. So that right there, in and of itself, is not a thing. Like, it's not a thing. He's not said anything about it. There's no rumblings about it. There's no insider, like, leaking out stuff about it. It's just people guessing, like, or making their bets, quote unquote bets or stuff. It's hyperbolic at best. So it just wouldn't make any sense also from Paramount's perspective, like you're saying, Jalen. Like, if you're a new owner coming in, like what they're saying about HBO, they want to let HBO be its own thing and stay independent because HBO just works so well as it is. I think David Ellison, as a film producer, realizes if it ain't broke, you don't gotta fix it. Like, DC Studios is working. What they're doing is working. It's making money. It's improving the brand image of DC. So, like, and let's be honest, like Figure Drawing is saying, James Gunn has worked with people who are not on the same side of the political aisle as he is. Like, I bet a lot of us have worked, with people before, or maybe even do now, or will do in the future. We go to work and we know that, our coworker or manager, maybe our direct report, doesn't quite have the same political beliefs as us. We have people in our families who don't share our political beliefs. That doesn't mean you walk out on them. It's also like you don't bring that into the workplace so much. So, that being said, again, John Campea, where this is originally coming from in this article, he himself said, like, it was his opinion and he was being a little hyperbolic, that he was a bit reactionary, and so I get it. Like, even that source, it's just a lot of times, against the game of telephone on the internet, you just lose sight of what the original messaging was. So, but yeah, I mean, look, they're professionals. James Gunn, Peter Safran are professionals. You don't, let politics get in the way. And it's one thing to talk about, like, look, if there is a toxic political culture at the new Paramount Warner Brothers that negatively impacts James Gunn and Peter Safran's ability to do their jobs effectively, or to the level that they want to be able to do, then them wanting to leave is something completely different from simply saying, oh, David Ellison's in charge, I'll see you guys later. I think those are two wildly different things. So I don't think that James Gunn is going anywhere. Like, I genuinely don't think James Gunn is going anywhere. Hello, Enterprising. How are you doing today? If you just joined in, by the way, you can always be kind, rewind. We did a lot of, other news talk before we got to this, but of course we are talking about James Gunn and DC and his future with DC Studios, which, again, right now, it's business as usual. Nothing has really changed. So, yeah. Exactly. Like, nobody wants to bring politics into the workplace. Like, why would you do that here? It doesn't make any sense. Like I was gonna give an example, but I'm kind of like blanking on what I was gonna say. but yeah, I mean, it wouldn't make any sense. Like DC Studios has so far churned out Superman, which was a big hit. It made plenty of money. It wasn't like a blockbuster of the ages, but it made money. It was profitable. Future Commandos was very well received. Peacemaker season 2 very well received, like broke all the season 1 records on viewership. And now what they've got on the way with Man of Tomorrow, I mean, the way they're marketing this stuff, James Gunn and Peter Safran have been very financially savvy. And then of course with Supergirl coming out this year, Lanterns on HBO, a lot of the early buzz around that is pretty good, despite what John might tell you. And then of course you've got what's the other one, Clayface, which is a big swing. Even though that movie is a lot more cheaply produced than Supergirl, it's a big swing, because if they can show that they can produce a DC movie for less than $50 million and have it be financially successful and viable at the box office, that all of a sudden opens up a lot more opportunities to potentially even do more movies a year, or certainly do the kind of movies that we currently don't see a lot of, which are these, less than $150 million budgeted movies, especially in the comic book genre, that feel like they get the same level of production value, attention, and success like they used to in the past, like where you used to have these like comedies and other mid-budget movies. The mid-budget movie is sort of been dead in Hollywood for years, and so James Gunn and Peter Safran taking a chance on that with Clayface, that's a big testing ground, and that could really open up a lot of options for them, with a lot of characters in the halls of DC that maybe aren't the biggest characters, aren't the most well-known characters, but you can justify greenlighting a movie with $40 to $50 million in the budget. Whereas you can't really say that you would do that if the movie was going to have a budget of $100 million or $150 million. So it's very, very significant. And again, all this drama comes from some speculation and hyperbole that was like from a reaction the day after the Paramount deal was announced with Warner Brothers. So yeah, I don't think James Gunn is going to want to walk out the door simply because new ownership walked in the door. You work with people on opposite aisles of this political aisles, on the political spectrum all the time. I used to have a job where literally my manager was a big fan, or not a big fan, but like a big believer in the current president of the United States. But he was a perfectly talented, amazing engineer, and I respected him for all his experience. His own, he was my manager, but his own his fellow engineer didn't agree with him politically at all. And every once in a while we would have a conversation, but you'd keep it respectful, and it never got in the way of our work, right? So I just don't think that there's any point in speculating that James Gunn and Peter Safran are going to quit just because they don't agree with the politics, the presumed politics of the new ownership coming in from Paramount. But it could still happen. I just think if it were to happen that James Gunn were to leave within the next 12 to 18 months, it would have happened because of other reasons, not because they don't agree on the politics of each other. It's going to be more likely if for example, David Ellison and Paramount decide that they want to have more of a day-to-day micromanagement style with how they manage James Gunn, Peter Safran's, output in the movies, on TV, with HBO. And I just don't think there's anything David Ellison has said so far that implies they will do that. So, I mean, without the evidence, all we can do is speculate one way or the other. So I know you're hoping that I'm right, and I'm hoping that I'm right too. I mean, we could all be wrong. It's like something else completely could happen, but look, here's the thing. Like I mentioned earlier, up until today, as of the last check for me, I mean, it might have happened later in the day, but when I was building the show for today and getting all the stories together, I was reading that David Ellison hadn't yet reached out to Casey Bloys at HBO. He hadn't really reached out to any of the other big studio heads over at Warner Brothers. So I imagine that included James Gunn and Peter Safran. But look, like you're saying, Jalen, there'll probably be a time sooner than later where David Ellison and his team get in touch with Peter Safran, James Gunn, and Pam-Abdi, Michael DeLuca, Casey Bloys, even Channing Dungey, who's the TV head at Warner Brothers, JV Peretti, who leads the streaming and games division, and talks to them and tells them okay, well, it's great to have you guys and on board, and we're looking forward to working with you and start establishing those relationships. It's not happened yet. I'm sure it's going to happen sooner than later, as it would in any situation like this. And then if DC Studios continues to be a success, I mean, go make a Condiment Man movie, like, if you can. Marvel wasn't a success overnight. Like, Marvel had to earn its way to making a Guardians of the Galaxy movie. They had to make a $1.5 billion Avengers movie before they could make a Guardians of the Galaxy movie. And that's where, of course, James Gunn entered the mainstream conversation to begin with. So yeah, I mean, look, as far as the estimated budget for Supergirl goes, Jalen, I think based on what James Gunn has said, or he said what the budget is not, because there was speculation about how high it could be, and James Gunn kept shooting it down. I think the range that we're looking at is probably somewhere between 125 to 150 million, which puts it certainly lower than Superman, but also very much in that range where a lot of Marvel movies and DC movies tend to land. So whereas Clayface, we know, is closer to 40-50 million dollars. Like maybe it could be closer to 80, maybe that's including marketing and advertising, but yeah, they're two different scales. Like one is clearly well under 100 million, the other one is a bit higher. Yeah. Enterprising saying there better be some agreement in place to ensure Gunn's vision isn't compromised by Ellison's political agenda. I hear you. I hear what you guys are saying. Again, where I land personally on this is like, look, and this is not me speculating. It's a fact that David Ellison donated to the Joe Biden campaign, several years ago, when Joe Biden was on the ticket. I think it's the year that he won. And yes, the Ellison family, especially David Ellison's father, and then he himself, have been cozying up to the current administration recently. But I also believe a lot of that they're doing, I mean, sure, they probably, align themselves on that part of the aisle, but it's also because they have business deals that they need to get through. And the current administration and the atmosphere in DC is ripe for a lot of greasing of the wheels. And if that's what they have to do to get the business deals through, aka this incredibly huge merger they need to get through the Department of Justice and the FCC, I think they're doing what they got to do to make it happen, and it's a cold calculation, but that's where I land based on the facts that I see on the ground. But again, I'm also on the outside looking in. It's not like I have an inside track to David Ellison or anybody else like that. So again, this is just my opinion on that. Much like what you're talking about here, the article speculation was based on the opinion of John Campea. So David Ellison hasn't said anything directly about letting go of James Gunn and Peter Safran. James Gunn and Peter Safran haven't said anything about walking away from their current positions once David Ellison's Paramount, finishes their takeover of Warner Brothers Discovery. Jalen, your fakes 915 saying, I think I have a solution. We need another Harley Quinn movie, just one more HQ movie. The people crave it. Well, I don't know if you need another Harley Quinn movie, not if it's like the Margot Robbie Harley Quinn. The Birds of Prey movie was very flawed. Maybe they'll do another season of Harley Quinn on HBO Max, though. Jokes aside, I do want to see a Batman movie. Yes, well, James Gunn's working on it. He's working on the DCU Batman movie. He's actively working on it. And of course, the Batman Part 2 goes into production later this year. So yeah, I mean, look, we would all love to see Warner Brothers Discovery stay as an independent company enterprising, but it doesn't look like that will be happening. So, it's not the timeline we live in. So, MTG saying, I'm sure David does want Gunn to stay. There is literally not a better qualified person to lead a comic book film universe. Exactly. James Gunn is even more qualified in a lot of ways than Kevin Feige is. Kevin Feige isn't a director. He isn't a writer. He's a producer. He's an incredibly talented, one of the most, if not the most successful producer in the history of Hollywood, who is also a nerd. Like, he's a comic book nerd. But James Gunn is a comic book nerd, and he adds to that his abilities as a writer, director, and a producer. So he doesn't have the same track record as Kevin Feige, because Kevin Feige has been producing movies for a lot longer. But at the same time, James Gunn is still a very qualified person who, quite frankly, I think, like, when it really comes down to it, knows even more about the comics and goes even deeper with his knowledge base than Kevin Feige does. So I think we're eating good right now because James Gunn is the man. And I think David Ellison knows that. And so I don't think that they'll be looking to upend all of that just so they can bring in somebody else they may or may not think would be better, because there's just no evidence of that out there. Like, tell me of another name that comes anywhere close to having that ability and that unique, resume portfolio that James Gunn brings to the table. Because remember, when James Gunn got fired by Disney, before they promptly went back and rehired him for the controversy around, his old tweets, he was the hottest free agent in all of Hollywood. And it wasn't like he just walked over to Warner Brothers or Warner Brothers just called him out of nowhere. Warner Brothers had to fight for his signature to bring him in to do a DC movie. And they straight up offered him a Superman movie back then. He told them, like, look, I'm not going to do a Superman movie right now. I'm going to do a Suicide Squad movie. And then he continued to write the Superman movie. And then once the Suicide Squad movie came out, which, look, the pandemic hurt the box office potential of it, but critics loved it, audiences loved it, and then James Gunn pitched his Superman script and got the job at DC Studios. So it took a lot of work. Like, he was this very well sought after person. Like, and there's a reason why Kevin Feige wanted to make him his right-hand man at Marvel Studios, right? But they missed out on an opportunity, and Kevin Feige probably still regrets it. But James Gunn got a better job out of all that, right? Like, if you ask James Gunn, how would you like to have it played out if it played out any differently, you'd be like, I don't want it to play out any differently. Like, from all of that chaos, he basically got his own studio head job, like Kevin Feige, and then he still gets to direct and write movies and stuff. So I think James Gunn is living, his best life. And I hear you that, they got a 6-month extension, but here's the thing, the 6-month extension almost exactly lines up with when the deal will close. So I think the idea here is to have some flexibility. And if you are Paramount, Skydance, if you're David Ellison and his team, you will know that you do not want some of these folks to end up on the market as free agent talent, like what happened with James Gunn when he was let go from Disney, because then another studio will promptly come in and hire you up and give you a job because you'll be very well sought after. So whether it's Casey Bloys, whether it's James Gunn, whether it's, Peter Safran, I doubt that they will let that contract run all the way down from Paramount Skydance perspective. If they're going to keep them around, I bet you this year we will hear that both Gunn and Safran and even Casey Bloys, I think they will all be getting extension offers, and then that will be a sign that David Ellison and his team want them to stick around. If they don't, then that will be a sign that they don't want them to stick around. But which way it goes, we don't really know so far. I mean, again, we can speculate, but I'm just saying, like, the future is yet to be written, and I don't think there's any point in us kind of jumping ahead of ourselves to kind of like make any predictions where we don't really have a ton to work with other than what we already talked about. Jericho saying Gunn can also create solid entertainment with a relatively smaller budget, perfect for the situation at hand, which is exactly an amazing point that you're making, because yes, especially if Clayface is successful, James Gunn and Peter Safran would have proven something that I think any studio head, any owner of any big studio in Hollywood would love, which is, hey, you can produce a blockbuster on a budget and make it happen for us with less money. I mean, any business appreciates greater margins of profitability with a smaller investment up front. Like, that's the way to do business. That's the wet dream. So I think David Ellison would love it if movies like Clayface were successful and they could do more of them at DC. Yeah, I think you're right, Jalen. I think once Clayface has been in theaters, and maybe like in around October or something, Q4 of this year, I think is when we will start hearing, maybe even sooner, but potentially around that time, that James Gunn and Peter Safran are potentially being offered an extension. So definitely we'll keep an eye out. We'll talk about it on the show, I'm sure, later this year as it happens. Oh, Enterprising saying, if just a heads up, if you don't hear from me in the next several months, is because I'm looking for a new place to live. Oh, okay, Enterprising. Well, I hope that you find that I best of luck to you, of course. Let us know if there's any way that we can in the community help you out. I mean, it sounds like you're going through a transition, so we wish you the best of luck there. Figure Drawing saying, good writing endures. I hope for the best with little interference. On that note, Wonder Man was thoughtfully made without the usual spectacle. Maybe Spatter Noir follows suit. Yeah, I think so too. I think the bar now for superhero media to succeed is a is high. Like, James Gunn knows this. He has said, like, look, you can't just keep making the same stuff over and over again, because it's like the Western movie, right? The genre, once it started to tire out, people got tired of seeing the same stuff over and over again. Like, we have been seeing superhero movies now as the mainstream go-to for like 20 plus years. People know what to expect, so you have to do something different, and you can't just repeat the same genre conventions. So with Spider Noir and Wonder Man, you're getting exactly that, and a lot of what James Gunn has given us so far with the DCU is exactly that. So I hope that we continue to get more of it, and I think that's another argument in favor of James Gunn and Peter Safran. And then Peter Safran, of course, is a super producer, like M2G is saying. I mean, between the Aquaman franchise, everything he did at New Line Cinema with Conjuring and stuff, multiple billion-dollar franchises. He's been a producer for a long, long time, and he's got a long relationship with James Gunn and many other filmmakers in Hollywood, and it predates DC Studios by quite a while. In fact, James Gunn lobbied Zaslav to hire Peter Safran along with him, because he was like, I can't take this job by myself. I need like a Peter Safran with me to do the business side of things. So I don't think either of them are leaving anywhere. I don't think David Ellison would want to leave Peter Safran and his producing powers along the way. So yeah, patience is a virtue, like Emo Nerd Girl is saying. Definitely true. Yeah, it will take a while. I mean, I don't think David Ellison is in a rush to make any announcements there. I think there's still, again, it's only been days. Like, two companies still are only in the preliminary stages of going through with the merger plans. So I don't think we'll get a lot of like very intricate details for a little while. But yeah, I mean, Marco, I'm very curious about Clayface. I have a feeling we're probably gonna get a trailer over the summer, and maybe when Supergirl comes out, they'll attach the trailer there. So I'm interested in seeing what that turns out into. Yeah, man, good luck enterprising, man. Absolutely, we hope that everything works out for you. Monumental Comics saying hopefully it all works out. Yeah, hello and what's up to Monumental Comics. I mean, and with that, let me actually kind of like go from the whole speculation side of things to actually hearing from the man himself. This is just from a few days ago. On Friday, James Gunn posted this, and this was a photo, of course, showing Michael Rooker. Of course, you got Jennifer Holland, you got Ozu there, and a number of other James Gunn's best friends and colleagues. Pollyanna McIntosh is there as well. Bobcat Goldthwait. So he's basically in Atlanta, so this is what James Gunn said. Pre-production can be long and lonely, so I love it when friends come to visit us in Atlanta, like Bobcat Goldthwait, Pollyanna McIntosh, and Michael Rooker, of course, the great Michael Rooker. I'm Mary Poppins, y'all. I love that stuff, man. James Gunn just knows how to make you cry, and yeah, he may have been your father, but he sure ain't were your daddy. And I was like, God, James Gunn, why do you do this to us? Yeah, so James Gunn and Ozu and Jennifer Holland, they're all spending some time in Atlanta while doing pre-production for what I assume is, Man of Tomorrow. So yeah, and it looks like Michael Rooker and a bunch of James Gunn's friends decided to pay them a visit, which is great. Yeah, we need the power of Gunn casting Latinas, D. Ross. If there's no other reason for Gunn to stick around, it should be that. Is a really good reason unto itself. All right, okay, Emo Nerd Girl, good night to you. Take it easy. Actually, we're almost done here too, because I think that's about the last thing I had. I mean, look, whenever Lobo comes out as a movie, which I bet you we're gonna get an announcement on that probably by the end of the year. Again, this is me kind of speculating now, but if Supergirl is really good and Lobo is a breakout star from that, which I want to say is more likely than not, then Jason Momoa will probably get an announcement that he'll get his own Lobo movie probably before the end of the year. And if that happens, then that's as much of a guaranteed success for DC as anything they've got on their calendar right now. So yeah, I mean, James Gunn is in good spirits. Again, like I said, James Gunn is not somebody who's, I mean, even if he's losing sleep over it, he's not going to be telling the world about it. And to be quite frank, I mean, here's the thing. If you have ever been working in a company where the company got bought out, sold, or merged with another company, and new ownership, new management came into place, you're always going to be worried that your job may be on the line, that things might change. And then sometimes it's not even a reflection of you and your work. It's just they realign things, and all of a sudden your job is no longer necessary. They're just like, we just don't have a need for your job. Like, so it's not even personal, and it could be that cold, of a decision. And it seems like, it's very impersonal, and sometimes it is, although for people at James Gunn's level, I don't think that will be the case. But still, look, the proof is in the pudding. The proof is in the pudding. DC has been a success under James Gunn and Peter Safran so far, like M2G is saying. And whether, he sticks around or not, or whether he's let go or kept around, I do hope also that David Ellison will continue the DCU, but I just don't think there's a need to be changing direction or to be changing the people that are working on it. So, yeah, I mean, I don't think any of us want to take another reboot, because it's been, we've had a couple, and then also the MCU right now is not in the best of places, and we'll be doing a bit of a soft reboot. So I think people will be craving continuity in a few years' time, when the MCU will be sort of halfway starting over, and you would have a DCU that will feel a little more familiar, because you would have had a number more movies, and especially more of those bigger characters populated. So with Gotham City and more in Metropolis and other parts of the DCU. So I think it's going to be very valuable to have James Gunn and Peter Safran around. And I firmly believe David Ellison, if he's a good businessman, if he knows what he's doing, and if he plans to deliver on the many lofty goals he's laid out so far for the new combined company, then you better believe that it's in his best interest to keep James Gunn and Peter Safran around at DC Studios. And with that, I think the question of will James Gunn stay or go under new DC ownership, the best we can do right now is speculate and give our prediction based on the facts that are available to us. I choose to say and believe in the idea that James Gunn and Peter Safran, they've got a good thing going, and as long as that good thing is producing results, which it is so far, there's no reason for them, to be let go from their jobs or to change direction. It would be a highly irrational, bad business decision for David Ellison and his leadership, to let James Gunn and Peter Safran walk or let them go. If I were them, I would be offering James Gunn and Peter Safran a new deal as soon as they're able to offer new deals to the current leadership at Warner Brothers, including Casey Bloys at HBO. So with that, I think we're going to wrap up tonight's show. Yeah, I mean, a lot of fans will riot if James Gunn and Peter Safran are about to leave. That would be a social media shitstorm. I'm sure John would have a thing or two to say about that too. But yeah, with that, guys, thank you for joining me. It's been basically a 3-hour long show. We're about to hit the 3-hour mark, especially sticking with me through the tech issues early on. But yeah, we'll be back tomorrow with another episode of DCU Daily. We'll also have Tier List Tuesday. Hopefully we'll have John back on. Hopefully he'll be feeling better. And then of course we're also hoping, it's not confirmed, so don't take this as gospel, but yeah, Liz might be joining us tomorrow as well. So we hope to see you tomorrow on another episode of DCU Daily, and also of course Tier List Tuesday. The poll for Tier List Tuesday is up right now, so you guys can definitely check it out. As of right now, Harry Potter movies is winning the vote, with Scream movies close second. So thank you, Jericho. Thank you for the compliments. We talked about a shit ton, and that's a technical term in terms of news, and I'll see you guys tomorrow. Until then, look up, look out. And as Ron would like to tell you, always fight for justice.
It's another project that's been blessed from the beginning.
There's the shot right there. That.
Okay, we don't need to see chorus.
Right there.
Hey, buddy. Eyes up here.
Now you want to get nuts?
Let's get nuts.
Here we go.
Victory mine. Ask me how am I doing? I'm telling you, really, I'm doing sublime. I never wait in a stewardess line. I just go do it. I'm moving my time. Really had nothing to do with it. How am I moving? I'm moving like you want to shine. Follow my lead. Don't listen to lies. I had to put me all on the line. That's why I know that victory's mine.
I prefer Jared Leto.
Hunka hunka!
Oh, and of course, as John would tell you, don't forget to hug Jeff Snyder and kiss Tom King. We'll see you tomorrow.